it within certain period of the 24 hour and it stays till the following day. We want to look at the shift from vehicle-centered policy and planning to the human-centered policy and planning. And the human-centered approach in transport planning is where we have this shift to talk about. One, we are looking at mobility to accessibility. And these are the approaches that we're going to look at today. From mobility to accessibility, that is accommodating the needs of different population, the children, the women, the elderly, and of course, the physically challenged. Two, private automobiles, moving from that to shared mode of transport. So that is where the mass transportation systems and other like multimodals and different ways, of course, of moving these mass persons. Three, the quest to improve efficiency and effectiveness should now be drifted to diversity, equality, and health. So that is where you find some governments rather looking at dedicated lanes, even for cycling, to improve the health of the people. Key health challenges in transport, such as physical inactivity. Air pollution should also be looked at. Mr. Chairman, CILT Ghana believes that with constructive dialogue and collaboration, we can address the current issues and forge a way forward that places the needs of the people at the heart of transportation planning. Through improved infrastructure, technology, effective coordination, and stakeholder engagement, we can create a sustainable and accessible public transport system that creates the socio-economic needs of Ghana's population. We have assembled here the distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and we have a keynote speaker and a group of panelists with expertise, practical expertise and knowledge in transportation planning, regulation and policy implementation. Now, these presentations and discussions that we're going to have today would provide an insight into the challenges faced by the public transport system and other solutions that we could prioritize human-centered transportation planning today. I urge all of you participants to take full advantage of these opportunities, to engage, to share knowledge, and to collaborate with our stakeholders with us here in transport, stakeholders in the transport sector, and also to make a significant impact on transportation planning in Ghana. Once again, I welcome you all to this symposium, and I hope that together our deliberations will be fulfilled and lead to a constructive solutions as we've met over here. Stronger together, as we normally would say. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Engineer Mark Amwama, CILT Ghana President. Would at this point like to acknowledge the following personalities in our midst. The first is Dr. Ebo Hammond, our immediate past president, CILT Ghana. We will come back to the panelists later, but also we have our Chief Director, Madam Mabel Sego. We'd like to acknowledge you. Thank you. Yes, we have the following agencies as well here present. The Volta Lake Transport Company representative. Please just give us a wave so that we can see, yes. And then the Greater Accra Passenger Transport Executive, GAPTE, Rep, yes, please. From the Ministry of Roads and Highways, reps, yes, thank you so much for coming. The Ghana Civil Aviation Authority, the Chartered Institute of Procurement, Ghana, not yet, Ghana Drive, sorry, Ghana Drive. Okay, we'll continue with the acknowledgements later. But at this point, we would want to call the CILT International President-elect. He has been a fellow of the Institute for over a decade now. He was very instrumental in organizing and putting together CILT. His contributions have supported in ensuring that CILT has gotten to where we are today. Today, he happens to be the CILT International President-elect, which means that probably in the next 90 to 99 days, he's going to be ascending into CILT International Presidentship. At this time, I'd like to invite, I think you already know him, Chief Titi Owusu-Note, to give us the special remarks. I think we can do it till he gets here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I bring you greetings from the global community, CILT, worldwide. And mine is just a special remarks because we have well-prepared speakers who are going to take the show. And after listening from the CILT Ghana president, who am I to add more? And also the keynote speaker, David Ofosu-Dorte, a well-renowned lawyer, a transport specialist. You can go on and on. I mean, I don't have to say much, but it's nice to be part of you. It's nice to be back home and be part of you, to listen to a very well-selected topic, which will shape the road and our systems in Ghana. So without saying that much, and not to bore you with so many words, I wish you all the best to this deliberation, and I hope we'll have a better takeaways so that it will affect us in future. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Chief Titi Owusu-Note. I don't know why, when it was your turn, the mic decided to misbehave, but I hope the mic knows who you are. Yes. I didn't want you to talk much. Yes. Thank you so much for the remarks you shared. Very short and sweet. I would also want to let all of you know that we're also live online on both our Facebook page and then also the Zoom platform as well. And we have almost 70 people online at the moment joining in to participate fully in the public transport symposium that we are here today to witness. We would just zoom straight into the next activity, which has got to do with receiving the keynote address, and that will be delivered by no other than a chartered fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. This man, I can tell you, needs no introduction. He's the founder and senior partner of AB and David Africa, a Pan-African business law firm with offices in Ghana, Zambia, Uganda, Zimbabwe, and Kenya. His experience cuts across over 3 decades of lead advisory roles in multidisciplinary projects. In addition, he holds a master's degree in public administration and applied business research. And like I said, is a fellow of the Institute. He's also served on the governing council of the Association of Ghana Industries. And in his past, I won't say life, he was also a very key person on the council of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. Ladies and gentlemen, without much ado, I'd like to invite Mr. David Ofosu-Dorte to give us the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. President Amama, President of CILT International, Past President, President of the Fellows Guild, fellows, and other distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I think I also have to address the Chief Director of the Ministry of Transport, who I work with every now and then. It's nice to be invited to speak on this occasion. I've drawn the attention of the IT person that I have to improvise. Normally, I like to control my own slides so I can relate to it. But how your setting is, you may have to either be watching me, either when I flip the paper or I signal you. Then, so let's be watching each other. And for those of you who know, when I speak, I drink as I speak. So Apologies if I have to do that. That's my stock in trade. And my last apology or my next apology maybe has to be with the time. I'm responsible for the 15-minute delay in the start. And I have to own up to that. I was summoned to one of the ministries. And what I had to do was a national assignment. Incidentally, I encountered the very transport challenges we are going to talk about. So I did call Patrick and Mark and told them I was on my way here. So apologies too for that. I keep time as much as I can. So this was unintentional. Having said that, so we are to be talking about after this presentation, a review of the public transport system and moving from vehicle-centered policy to a human-centered policy. Let me make some initial remarks on that because I took a look at the official policy of the government, and surprising, there is not much to criticize from a policy perspective, though there is a lot to criticize from an operational perspective. So there's always a dichotomy between that which we state in our intention to do and that which we actually do. And it's important to set that premise in place. Now, to do that, since I'm reviewing a system, I will be looking at the system, and what is the basis for my review is going to be based on my observations over 3 decades of experience in this sector, and I'm still working a lot in the transport sector. For those of you who may not know, I do consult extensively for various transport-related agencies. I just mentioned people who have just come to sit in the front, so I do work a lot on transport-related issues by the day. And then also it will be based on observations that I, as a fellow and as a transport practitioner, I see over the years. Even though we are talking about public transport, I'll be making copious references to the private sector as well, because no system exists in isolation, and the systems are interdependent. And I believe that during the discussion that will follow, we will be looking at it from that way. So it is in this context that I will be speaking. And because I will be talking about, since I have personally experienced, I will, as and when necessary, be drawing references. Where I can mention the details, I will, if it's public knowledge. Where I cannot, I will make reference without stating the details. But I have not only worked in this sector since as far back as, I may not look it despite my white beard, but I worked in this sector as far back as 1982. GD and I used to work in the same place, from working under the Ministry of Transport, the then STC Ball College Division, to City Express, which then succeeded it, to leaving the sector and going into consulting in transportation and consulting across the board in transport, core transport before the legal aspects of transportation, to coming to serve on the board of STC, to having run one of the largest bus fleets when I used to be the manager for Greater Accra. I had 157 buses under my control. To having worked with the likes of Jamra to help set up GAPT and the rest. And I'm mentioning these for specific purposes. To having helped put together Ghana's current railway law that set up the GRDA and the rest, I had the privilege of writing it. The law on the Center for Urban Transportation, and many others which will become relevant as and when necessary. I think I have a few things I can share, and hopefully some of the recommendations will be taken on board. So having said that, let's look at exactly what the components of the transport system is, as I see it. First, it consists of the users, who in my view are more important than the other components, even though a lot of emphasis is not placed on them. And these users are humans, mainly. Even though the users includes goods, these goods are meant for human consumption. And therefore, the human component of the system is quite important, but I think it will be reviewed as I go along, that much as we all agree that that is important and is reflected in policies, in reality, we don't seem to put much emphasis on it for various reasons. Then, of course, the institutional framework is part of the system, and the institutional framework for Ghana, I will just group it into the MDAs and the MMDAs. That's the ministries, departments, and agencies. And in this context, you find the Ministry of Road and Transport, Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Roads and Highways, and then the other related ministries in this regard. Of course, there are the regulators who work under the ministries who are all components of the system, and then there are the vehicles themselves in the various modes. And you will see on the slides, if you are showing that I actually add pipelines to it. One of the least talked about is the non-motorized component of the system. I had a privilege years ago of leading an assignment on the non-motorized transport in Ghana, in Accra, which I will talk about shortly. And I'm sure that many people will be surprised that we do have a non-motorized transport system in Accra, which is actually not operating. Now, so let me begin with that before I continue with the system. So way back in 1996 on the non-motorized study, one of the things we did was to identify where the poor actually work and where the poor live. And I'll be returning to mobility needs of the poor shortly. But working with IDS Consult, with engineers, we mapped out the various walking routes and cycling routes of the poor and actually developed a 50-kilometer network of bicycle paths around Accra. Can people show by hands who know where the bicycle paths around Accra are? Yeah, I can see 3. But do you see them operating now? We actually designed and built 50 kilometers of bicycle paths around Accra, starting from Nima, where people call the Nima Gata. There's a whole pavement of bicycle paths marked coming all the way through Asylum down, going through the CBD to Makola area is 50 kilometers, fully funded by the World Bank and marked. Today, they are either parking lots or shops or kiosks. So it is not a question of the policy or implementation, but an entire indisciplined system actually at times destroyed that which we even built. So the system includes a motorized transport, and it was just to illustrate as a shocker that even when we have gone ahead to create a human-centered approach in our policy implementation, we end up destroying it because we are so indisciplined that if, for example, it is a politician, the head of the constituency who mounted his kiosk on the bicycle path, he will be allowed to stay there. Of course, the one in opposition will be against it until it is his turn to occupy it. And then the cycle goes on, and that's how we destroy the bicycle path. So these are the components of the system. But the components don't end there. It also includes the routes and the network. So for example, if you take the road sector, it will include the road network, which we do talk about a lot. Why do we talk about the road network a lot and emphasize so much on the road network? Because that is what determines who wins elections. And that's important that we have to face the reality. I know the chief director is here. These are the things that we have to confront with. Nobody will actually be electing you for the number of people you have passed, but the number of roads that you have. So if you see the political parties, they are competing over, I built 38,000 kilometers of roads and I built 50,000 kilometers of roads. And when you look at their victory speeches and their manifestos, it emphasizes on the roads and move us away from the use of the roads, which is the human and the good component. So I think, again, I want to emphasize that this is not the policy, but the implementation. Now, any transport system, including whether air, road, sea, etc., must have a place of rest. And the place of rest is where you either board it or you alight from. So it may be a terminal, it may be a bus stop, it may be a port, etc., or where you load goods on. And that's part of the system, and I will touch on it as I go along in this presentation. You will see that there are also miscellaneous other issues that relate to a system. So, for example, warehouses are part of a transport system. So when I used to work in the Ball College division, for example, in Tema, where GD also worked at some point, Grains Warehouse was the largest warehouse in the country, and quite a number of trucks come into the yard to come and pick grains and distribute. And you will know, if you worked in Tema, that on that 18-acre stretch behind it was the silos built under Kwame Nkrumah's regime, where goods, food stuff were distributed and where Food Distribution Corporation and the rest pick goods and grains from to distribute across the nation. So there's a direct correlation between warehousing and transportation. Now, similarly, there are operators, safety experts, etc. I did hear Cletus talk about safety of palanquins. Palanquin is actually a form of transportation, as you indicated. And indeed, I have been known to criticize chiefs who sit in palanquins. I'm waiting for the day they will be out of fashion. If you happen to be a chief here, my apologies. But I think a day will come when, if everybody is well educated, we wouldn't have palanquin careers, unless it's a professional degree, where you need 4 people to carry you. And for the avoidance of doubt, there is nothing cultural about palanquin. It used to be practiced by the French until Pascal invented the carriage. So there's nothing cultural about it. It's just a means of transportation for people to display their pomposity. I once witnessed somewhere in Greater Accra region, a chief fall from a palanquin and his buttocks hit the ground. Even though I sympathize with him, I think I smiled at the same time. I hope it becomes a thing of the past one day. Now, having said that, the safety issues are quite important as well, whether it is non-motorized or motorized. And therefore, when I get to a crossing, a traffic light on the road, and these motorbikes behave as if they are not vehicles, and they cross the road because it is red, I get surprised. I was in Niger during the launch of the AFCFTA, and I saw something that surprised me up to this day. They still have donkeys that move goods across, but at the traffic light, the donkeys stop when it is red. I mean every word of that. I don't know how they are trained. They do stop in Niger, near me here. They stop when it is red and move when it is green. Yeah, maybe somebody is, but I saw it. I'm like, really? But our motorbikes don't. I had occasion to draw the attention of a very high police official one day, and I think somehow there's been some improvement, but there's still a lot to be done. And then, of course, safety engineers, etc. The other part of the transport system that is often forgotten is the issue of planning. And by planning, I mean spatial planning. Because very often when we study economics, we are told that the basic needs of human beings are food, shelter, and clothing. That is true. But the human nature by itself likes to interact with each other. That is why when the telephone system was introduced, many thought that transportation was going to die. It didn't. Transportation actually, in terms of its needs, have increased. The more technology increases, the more transportation actually increases. Human interaction is something you cannot take away. So there is always a constant need to move. And then there is also the relationship between where people work and where they stay. You will see that as a result, in the absence of motor transport, people walked. They walk to go and see each other or walk to their farm where they work. So transportation is a basic need of humans. And perhaps when we talk about the basic needs of humans, we ought to be transportation and not limited to only the 3 core things that economists talk about. And that is why horses became a form of transportation. And royals liked to use horses. That's why boats, which were not motorized, were also invented. And that's why the 2-wheel bicycle also became, and then boats moved to ships, and then steam trains and electric trains and cars and aircraft. As Ford said, if he had asked his clients what it is that they wanted, they would have said they wanted faster horses. But he thought that if you motorized something other than a horse, it becomes a means of movement. It may surprise many to know that when the train was invented, there was a big movement to actually prevent it from being used, because they said since the steam engine was moving more than 7 kilometers an hour, the human tympanic membrane could not contain it, and that it will have of destroying the ears. Well, today the trains are much faster. The Chinese have over 300 kilometers an hour, and the human beings are still using it. And aircraft are moving at about 500 to 800 kilometers an hour, depending on the type of aircraft. And the human ear is still able to withstand it. But it's an example of human resilience and human resistance at the same time. Okay, stay there. Now, we cannot further talk about transportation without talking about how urban areas develop. And this is important even for people in Ghana, because many years ago, and I will illustrate when I come to the recommendations before I conclude. Many years ago, Africa generally tended to be very rural. Today, there are more people in urban areas than there are in rural areas. It is very important we understand that. So we are getting very, very urbanized. In urban areas and similar to rural areas, there are three ways cities develop, and it has a direct effect on whether our transport system becomes human-centered or not. The first way it develops is what is called the radial pattern. A radial pattern is where there is a typical place where everybody congregates. And as a result, people build around that radius and keep expanding and it spreads. So when you say Kumasi, for example, is a trading post, and places like Kegitia will develop and people then begin to develop around it. So it kind of radiates. That's how Accra developed. Jamestown was the lighthouse, and then it radiates beyond Jamestown. Then we've got the gradient pattern, which is the map you have on the screen, where you consciously design the place into grids and create a lot of alleys in between. It's a conscious development. Dansuman and Abraka have that kind of. So in between, apart from the main roads, it's very difficult to find congestion because there are several ways within which you can route yourself through Adabraka. Tema has that type of gradient development. But the most common in our cities is the linear. And I'll talk about the linear shortly. Now, the radial and the linear dominate our has got a lot of effect on how we actually live in our cities as livable urban areas, impacts on our human quality. Now, what is the linear pattern? That is when two places are so important that people constantly commute between those two places. And a typical one is when Tema Harbour was built, and therefore Accra Lighthouse became, or Jamestown Lighthouse became less and less important. What happens? What happens is that because everybody knows that the next place is where people go to and return in the evening, they start to acquire the size of the road in order to do their merchandise. And as the size of the road becomes full, people build behind the size of the road. And those who build behind get other people build behind them and behind them. What then happens is as you attempt to access the main road, if you drive on the right like we do, a left turn begins to create a traffic backup. It's very easy. If you want to know the cause of traffic on a linear road, just go to Teshi. When you are turning left, the traffic backs up automatically. When you are turning right, the traffic backs up less. It's a question of city development. So conscious city development like Abuja creates less traffic than you will find in Lagos, which is a radially developed city. And that is why town planning and land use planning is a very important component of transportation. I had the privilege of drafting the current town planning law we use in Ghana. That is the land use and spatial planning plan. Go back, I think, yes. And to solve this problem, we consciously developed a 4-tier hierarchy of settlement in order that you will have a national spatial development framework, a regional spatial development framework, a district development spatial framework, and a local plan, which all dictates where routes should be. These things are actually there. They are just not being used. And I just want to draw attention to that. And they are designed to be very human-centered, but nobody applies them because those who made the decisions completely disregard this and decide to do otherwise. Ghana has a lot of policies and plans in place. It is about how we deal with them. Let's go back to. So if you then realize that you reside in a place where there are challenges regarding how the place is designed, the next challenge that results is a drop in human productivity. Now, in 1993, I led a study, which is a UNDP study on mass transport, and measured, among other things, the exhaust fumes from vehicles. And 89% of all those vehicles were emitting smoke above the acceptable human levels. So we had a component of the team which were doing that. We also computed how long it takes for a person to get to work as a result of our inefficient smart transport system. and we measured how much it affects our productivity. There was a whole computation as to how much we could add to our GDP if people had mass transit options and could get in time, just as an illustration. So these have a direct effect on our quality of life, on the growth, on our wealth creation, and even on the air we breathe. Because the more we stay in traffic, the more we are likely to have soot emissions. Okay, in this system, it's changing. Like every system, you must always monitor the changes. What is changing around our system? We all know about the AFCFTA and many other things. The key thing to recognize is that the continent is constantly integrating. So I took a look at the transport policy on what it is that they recognize about the changing system. And goal 4.1 of the AU agenda actually recognizes that and talks about sustainable and inclusive growth. That is human-centered. The policy is there. If you go into what is sustainability, it means that ensuring people can have long life, ensuring that what you develop does not destroy their life, etc. And economic growth means people are going to have better life, etc. But 4.2 also talks about industrialization. What it means is that we are going to add a lot of non-human aspects, but the humans are going to work in that industries. So how do we plan the location of our industries in such a way that it has a relationship with how the humans behave in our society? Then it talks about economic diversification and resilience. I will touch on that regarding people who are less endowed than the rest of us. So essentially, movement of goods and persons are becoming very internationalized, and international conventions like the Cape Town Convention of Movement and the rest are becoming more and more important. There is a particular protocol I need to draw attention to, because when we talk about the AFCFTA, everybody talks about just trade. There are 14 protocols altogether under Agenda 2063. That is to create as the heads of state will say, the Africa we want. And I play quite a lot of active role in the private sector in this space. One particular protocol which is less talked about, which affects us, which I wish those who have access to heads of states across Africa will push for it, is what is called the SATAM, the Single Air Transport Market. The Single Air Transport Market, unlike the AFCFTA itself, which requires 22 countries to ratify, requires only 15 countries to ratify for it to become operational. As at 3 years ago, it had only 8. It still has 8, the last time I checked. What does it do? Now, for those in the aviation industry, essentially it will eliminate the fifth freedom. In other words, it will create an automatic open skies where airlines can fly across Africa. We all know that aviation has a very high cost in Africa. And it's important that if we can bring down the cost of aviation, then movement of people will become quite easy. At the moment, if anybody has to, as it were, go into, let's say, services to another country, they have to go and see Mabel and then do bilateral services agreement and have long negotiations. I mean, I have led a couple of airlines in negotiations. I represent one airline that every year has to do renewals. It's just cumbersome. Yet, in 1998, this country signed an open skies protocol with the US. And in my view, I think that open skies agreement with the US is one of the reasons why Ghana Airways became very stressed. Why do I say that? Because any expert in the airline industry will tell you that once that agreement required Ghana to fly to the US for 5 years before the US airlines will come in. What that really means that you are developing the route, because prior to that, there wasn't any body operating the route. And I can see Afi nodding her head. You essentially develop the route. And then when you were unable to pay your bills and Ghana Airways was collapsed after owing 150, then it was open for everybody to come in. So we indirectly killed our own airlines. So in looking at SATAM, which I support, it may be important for us to look at this effect and also look at the advantages we can have if we want to create a hub. And when we are talking about transport system, we are talking about transport system in all its modes. The more passengers we fly into this country, the more, for example, passengers also need to connect on roads, because transportation is a door-to-door service. So this is part of the changing ecosystem. It is a fast in the continent. Let's have the next slide. So at this stage, Mr. Chairman, I will take a look at the modes in 10, focusing heavily on the road sector, because it comprises about 95% of the entire movement of people and goods. And what is it that I see in the system? Trotros is a common word. I think it's even on Wikipedia. There are similar ones in other countries. In East Africa, they call them the matatus. Is that how they call it? Yeah. And of late, we've had the so-called okades, which is border in East Africa. I mean, shuffling people around, some disobeying traffic routes. And then we have taxis. Now, our taxi feature until Uber arrived was quite prominent. And I wrote a paper which actually won an award at the University of Lancaster on the taxis and unionized power. Now, I'll touch on the unions shortly. But having said that, our taxi system is a shared taxi system mainly. Shared taxi means that you go to the station, it loads 4 people, and then, you move. Unlike other places where it takes just 1 person and takes you to your destination. So we have a large amount of shared taxi system. Then developed what was called the drop-in. You pay and then the person drops you. And then we have the rover taxis where you stand and then you do this and then. It's all part of our system. That's how our taxis work. As compared to Singapore, where you can stand in your house and press a bell and the yellow light flashes and the taxi driver notices that you are there. Or you dial a certain number and then they notice you are there. So it's a question of how the same taxis, but how we've structured it. I'm just describing out our system. So over the years, lack of faith in terms of how the system works to perfection for the needs as humans, perhaps reflects what the taxi driver has behind his signboard there. We just recourse to God in that. It's good to trust in God, but if we can do, we tend to leave to God. Now, we don't have a BRT system like you will see on the lower left side of your slide. We have attempted GAPT and Ayalolo, and I believe something may throw light on it, on its failures more than successes. But I'm describing the system and its challenges, and we'll make recommendations on how. Then, when it comes to the budget, where clearly you see what policymakers are putting, whether they are putting emphasis on human or not, as I indicated earlier, the budget is focused on roads. So you see every government beats its chest as to it having done the best of roads. For those of you who like to do NDC MPP politics, you will remember John Mahama's time, there was a lot of talk about Accra, Dubai, which was a requirement Nkrumah overpass. And then now the challenge is Pokuasi interchange. So everybody tries to beat the other because infrastructure is visible. And we pump a lot of money into that. However, lip service is paid to the operational and the human side of it. It is in the policy, as I've indicated. But take any of these policies and I will ask you, show me the pedestrian walkway on these 2 roads, for example, I've talked about, which are matched out. If you can identify the pedestrian walkway along, yet in our study on poverty needs of the poor funded by the World Bank, we identified not only where the poor are located, but where the poor work. And unlike the rich, where 66% of all trips goes into the CBD, even in the case of the poor, it is higher. So we actually interviewed people who walk from Medina to Accra on a daily basis. But you don't find pedestrian walkways or motorized walkways on these routes. Yeah, they are designed and they are touted. So it is not lack of putting money in the transport or in the infrastructure on roads, but the emphasis as to who it benefits. Now, because we don't have mass transport services either, these roads lack also one basic thing. It doesn't have ways dedicated to buses. Again, something is here, and I'm sure he would like to share his views along the line regarding what happened to our attempt to have dedicated bus lanes and all that. In one of the studies I did for urban roads, we were actually to earmark a whole lane on the from the Tekwashie Liberation Road to Accra and mark it red and dedicate it entirely to bus lanes. We walked the entire path using precimeter and the rest to measure the width and develop the proposal on quality, the frequency of services, etc. The books are out there. I got paid anyway, so I'm fine with that. Similarly, the BRT, the overpass which was done on the graphic road, the attempts to do a whole one to Kaswa, there were steady talks to Koretiba, Lamata. Yeah, it's all those things were done. In fact, at the time Nigeria did the Lekki Road, Ghana had hoped to do that far in advance. Now the danger is that when you take Ghana's road space as against developed space, we have a lesser percentage of road devoted to as compared to urban development. Relation between amount of road space in a city as against the developed space. Normally you have between 10 and 15%. The last time I checked, we were around 8%. And it will tell you why we have a lot of pressure. I had trouble many years ago when I wrote an article at the time before the N1, the second part of the N1 to Malam was developed. And I said the road was going to fail. The road had been designed to move 5,000 cars per traffic hour. But what had not been observed was that the movement of people around the race course was such that much as people had predicted that Accra was going to develop towards the north, which is Pokwasi area, and many people went to acquire land there. It was actually developing towards the west and northwest, which is from the race course all the way to Kaswa. Yes, these are things you can observe in your, and that caused the Abekan La Paz area to suddenly sprout. Incidentally, I came back this time as a lawyer, not as a transportation planner, to lead the Millennium Challenge negotiations, which led to the development of the Malam interchange on the N1 that, redeveloped that corridor. But we spent extra $110 million, which perhaps could have been avoided if we had simply looked at the demographic pattern and the redistribution of population in the city, which is why I admire Land Use Planning Authority for they are trying to do an Accra master plan to the northern part of Accra. These things have effect on us and where we emphasize what we do. But as I indicated, for political purposes, what we focus on is how many roads we build that enables us to win election. So that's the reality of the system. Now, vehicle quality leaves a lot to be desired. Now, so far as I'm concerned, there is a cartel. And this is not the first time I'm talking about it. I have written about it. I actually wrote an article co-authored by Mr. Kwachi those days again, which also won an award. I received a plaque for that on unionized power. And we did a computation as to the power of unions in Ghana. At that time, 85% of all commercial vehicles, public commercial vehicles on the road were controlled by the GPRTU. It became worse when the PNDC passed PNDC Law 317. That law enabled the GPRTU to form a police, quote and unquote, which could arrest other vehicles, and they had a training school. And then a fight ensued between the GPRTU and other branches of road operators, Progressive Transport Owners Association, ProTour, Ghana Road Transport Haulage Association, etc. There were about 4 of them. They rivaled and then created something called the Ghana Road Transport Council. Do not confuse it with the Ghana Road Transport Coordinating Council. I'll touch on that shortly. That was led by a gentleman who then operated a bus service by name King's Theatre. For those who have lived long enough in Accra, this was a private sector mass transit operating in Accra. There were 2 of them, King's Theatre and King of Kings. King of Kings was owned by a Nigerian and King's Theatre was owned by a Ghanaian called Williams. These were rivals of MMT, private sector owned. Now they formed the Ghana Road Transport Council with a view to rivaling GPRTU. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the PND's Law 317 went ahead and also together with other things, assigned the control of all bus terminals owned by the MMDAs to GPRTU. It's an important part we should not forget. You cannot talk about Ghana's transport system if you want to call a spade a spoon. A spade is a spade. So and I'm not against GPRTU, for the avoidance of doubt, my uncle used to be the general secretary. I will not mention his name. And I dealt with them, a lot. I was responsible for relocating Nima 441 bus terminal from there to the Novotel car park before the AMA office was built. This was a World Bank assignment. So when we had to do terminals in Tamale, KJT, etc., which were assignments I led, the studies I negotiated with them, so I deal with them. But having said that, because of the power to control terminals, they became more powerful than the assemblies. And even though by law the assemblies control and own the terminals, they were handed over to GPRTU. And that was the reason why the Ghana Road Transport Council tried to rival them. Today, at the last time I checked, even though I heard GPRTU has left it, the Ghana Road Transport Council subsequently became Ghana Road Transport Coordinating Council. That brought into its GPRTU, STC, and all the others. That is the best way to create a cartel. Now, why is this very important when it comes to whether our system is human-centered or not? Because we overlook Article 21 of the GPRTU Constitution. I don't know whether they've changed the section, but that used to be the article. That article is headed the shift system. It operates on a system where they call something the skill. Now, for those of you who have stopped using trotro, you can do a check walk around the terminals. A skill, according to the Constitution, is where a trotro stops at the terminal for you to load. And until it is full, the next trotro cannot load. Technically, it is a full load factor concept. Now, in transportation of almost, when you have 60% load factor, you are breaking even or making profit, essentially, when 60% of the seats are occupied. But these operate on a full load factor concept. What we forget is that what we learn in school is the same thing happening on the road, and we need to look at how they relate. Now, this full load factor concept also has another problem with the shift system. It empowers what they call the bookmen to jump the shift system if a person has done some work for the GPRTU or some community service. So what that means is that if you were somebody powerful enough within the terminal, you could be loading frequently, whilst others could not. The more important part is that it also denies the buyer or the user of the service of quality, because you are forced to join whatever vehicle is quote and unquote on the scale. It is a seller's market and not a buyer's market. Any idea that we don't have transportation system in this country is a conscious creation of indiscipline. I'll repeat that anytime. In fact, the World Bank at some point gave Ghana a promise to give money to create a transport finance corporation with a view to fund private sector persons like King's Theatre who could buy their own buses and operate quality services. And I did a study for the government on quality service. But because the terminals remain in the hands of GPRTU and the private unions, it was not possible to, because a vehicle, remember I said from the beginning, must come to a stop for you to alight or board. And we don't have adequate transit stops either. It got to a point where you have also an operator who had a quote and unquote a police force to arrest their colleagues. Now, luckily, upon the coming into force of Act 863, the Road Traffic Act, the PNDC Law 317 was repealed. But this effect is still lasting, and it has not technically been wholly reversed. So you will see that we lack proper mass transit systems, the quality is not there. We lack proper mass transit systems, etc. As a result, us have become a status symbol, and everybody needs to buy a car in order not to be part of the system, the bad system we have created. We don't have mass transit systems, and we all buy cars. Even for the mass transit, because of the challenges of traffic on the road, and because we don't align traffic very well, the trip frequencies have dropped. When the Accra Master Plan was done in 1991, average trip frequencies between Tema and Accra was 12. You could do 12 trips in a day. By 1996, it had dropped to 6. Around 2001, the last time I checked, it had dropped to 3. I'm not so sure how many frequencies they do now. In other words, you utilize your vehicle less. So if you have to pay back on the vehicle, it becomes very challenging. And those are the things we need to pay attention to. Another aspect of human aspects we need to deal with is the provision in the road traffic act, which requires a driver to rest after every 4 hours for a minimum of 30 minutes. Either the drivers don't know this or it's not enforced in any way. If you go to UK, for example, you can flag the black cab anywhere, but there are designated stops for the black cabs to rest. So you see, as you see in the slide, places you go, you want to call a black cab, and he is resting. And there are ways to monitor whether they rest or not. There are a lot of drivers in Ghana, especially taxi drivers, who start work at 5 a.m. and end at 10 p.m. and they eat behind the steer whilst driving. I'm sure some of you have. I mean, it definitely has a relationship to safety, because we all know that accidents can also be caused by human error, and especially when you are falling asleep and you are tired. Then, in respect of the quality of services on roads in particular, let's talk about the disability. Now, 56% to 70% of all disabled persons suffer from either vision impairment or from what we call musculoskeletal diseases. So their movement are impaired. You have no requirement for people to actually ensure that the disabled can access the first step of the bus or structure, and therefore they are also pushed into the private car, and even the private car, in terms of the construction and use, apart from its ability to use, accessing it also has a challenge, because there are ways in which you can enhance the ability to access it. When it comes to buildings, a lot of work has been done by town planning, and it's easy to find access for the disabled in all buildings. In the vehicle public transport sector, that's more challenging. Then we don't devote places for non-motorized vehicle, non-motorized transport. I'm going to bring non-motorized transport into two. One is where you have the things like bicycles, etc. So the bicycle lane, which I started talking about, which we have kind of killed, the idea of the bicycle lane we did around Accra was to replicate this all over the city. But if we've killed the one we did, replication is another matter. I've already talked about the lack of pedestrian walkways. But then we also have unfriendly accessibility when it comes to those who actually walk. I talked about the lack of pedestrian walkways. And even when we come to crossings and overpasses, you know the hula baloo about the Adenta overpass and how unfriendly many people found it. There's a joke going around that if you were with your girlfriend, he could be on one level and you are at another level, and it's a long distance relationship. Now, having said enough about roads, let's deal with the rail sector. So we did a change from the original SMCD 75 and created the new law which sets up the GRDA as a regulator and separates operation from a regulator role. However, there hasn't been, to the best of my knowledge, any private sector operation properly so-called who have been licensed to operate in the system. So again, the intention is there. And the idea was that the diesel multiple units on the Nsawam Road were going to be, as it were, expanded to the point where you can have intercity trains moving across, let's say, Accra and Kumasi. And it is possible to maybe go to Kumasi and arrive in Accra very early in the morning. When I was young in secondary school, we had sleeper services in Ghana's triangle between Accra, Kumasi, and Takoradi. So we had the Eastern Corridor, Western Corridor, and then the Central. None of these exist anymore. So neither the goods are being moved on the trains, on the train lines, nor the humans using it, apart from the Nsawam to Asaprochena. And the aspect about the human one, which was not taken into account, you will notice that the design of the Asaprochena rail line kind of conflicted with the establishment of the cocoa shed somewhere in the middle of the previous rail line. I'm sure Cletus can talk more about it than I can, which prevented those who worked in Tamahabo from using it. The route of the Mpakadan Railway is another example, which is we're talking about, because the acquisition of the corridor, I believe, made the government pay compensation to places that had been acquired during Nkrumah's time. In other words, these places already belong to government, because the Tamahabo was built with a rail line which actually took the boulders on the rocks from the Shire Hills to build the Tamahabo, and the corridor was there reserved. So if the corridor had been preserved and policed, it would have been much easier to do that project and less costly. But today we have to pay extra, again, because of the indiscipline in our system. So we don't have intercity trains, and we don't have intracity trains either. And we don't have mass transit, less bus rapid transit. In the maritime sector and inland waterways, after we killed Black Star Line, we have not had any new national shipping line. Again, there is a human aspect of this I want to talk about. And Ghana will have reaped a lot of benefits if we had actually maintained Black Star Line or recreated it. Why so? Because it is needed more now than at any other time. Kofi Mbia is here and can tell you that for liner vessels which operate scheduled services from port to port, we don't have any. And therefore, it is actually more expensive now to send goods to Cameroon than it is to send it to the port of Dover in Europe. It's 90 cents to Europe, but about 150 cents to Cameroon because it goes to Europe and come back. Yeah, that's the reality because we don't have liner services. Now, this, apart from affecting employment, affects the type of goods we consume because we are more forced to consume goods from Europe because that's where the goods are being shipped from. These have a relationship to human life and human quality. Again, for those of you who may know, I launched a campaign as far back as 2010, hoping that Ghana will be declared center of the world. If you Google center of the world, you mention my name. I have a lot of videos online. Campaign, wrote memos to political parties. Nobody took it serious. I think until 2017, when the vice president and a few members of the current government be mentioning it in passing, etc. The IPC have used this for a couple of adverts, etc. There were a few of us, myself, Kojua Kutubuati, and a gentleman in Tema, who took the campaign on ourselves because we are actually center of the world in terms of, and I will explain why I'm saying this. In terms of being on the latitude 0, where the 0 degree entered the last before it enters the sea, and being 5 degrees above the equator. Many people say we are on the equator. We are not on the equator. We are just 5 degrees above the equator. And as far back as when Meridian Hotel was built, there was a 0 room that Nkrumah had designed, and they charged a high amount for you to sleep in the 0 room. We took a GPS there, and actually a 0 room today is about 2 degrees off the actual 0 with improvement in technology. We went to the site, etc. What happened? Some of us, private sector people, wrote memos, met with GPHA and the rest when the term expansion was being done, that we should reserve the 0 place for tourism. And that is important to expand the port, but tourism and human aspect was equally important. And that you can integrate the two. You need not put containers on 0 degrees. These efforts were made by us as private people. It fell on deaf ears. You can go to me. I've made videos on this. Luckily, the chief director is here. Maybe it will be revisited. Maybe one day we will reclaim part of the sea and realize that if you actually put people on the 0 degrees, it is the only place that merchant navy come and perform ceremonies because they can be in east and west at the same time. The Tema Presbyterian Church is sitting on the 0 degrees. The Queen and her husband, Queen Elizabeth, worshipped there when they came to Ghana in 1999. How much religious tourism can we claim if we actually, brought that up? People who even talk about it in government don't understand the implications. We've written papers on papers. We walked to the site with GPHA people and identify places which could be landing sites for tourists, and the terminal will all be there, and from where they go, where they worship, etc., etc. I can go on and on and on and on. We removed the human aspect and focused only on the fact that we will have returns on investment. Today, we get actual returns on investment. I know, I'm sure Mabel gets a check every now and then. But having said that, the real aspect of the human part, we often de-emphasize. Maybe this is not meant to be an attack on you. It's just impasse. Let's go to the next slide. All right. Inland waterways. One good project is the Impakadan Railway. It's a multimodal project because it connects with fluvial transport. I happen to be involved in that project, so I wouldn't go too much into that in terms of advisory work on it. It involves fluvial transport connecting to the port of Debre through the water lake. But you will see that the water lake still remains uncharted in terms of the tree stumps and the accidents, etc. I don't know whether that has been removed now. Okay, and I understand they are working on it. But that's a major transportation model that can have and create Ghana as a transport corridor to, and its impact on our human quality is very important because it takes away all the accidents and the huge Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger trucks going on our roads through Kumasi. And you can actually put them on barges through the Mpakadan Railway and pick them up at Debre and drive them to Burkina Faso. And for those in the shipping industry, if you create a true shipping a bill of lading, the person can ship his goods from anywhere and receive it in Mali through a transshipment arrangement. These are things we can do, and it will create jobs for a lot of people. Again, it is not for lack of ideas. These ideas are known. It is a lack of action. Aviation. Now, we know about Terminal 3. I won't talk about it. Has increased the throughput. I pray that we will one day convert Terminal 2 into another same class at Terminal 3, connect them by a travelator and increase the throughput. Because we are competing. Rwanda, which is much smaller than Ghana, is building an 8 million passenger terminal. I think they are finishing in 2028. Our current Terminal 3 at most can take 3 million people. And we are about, how many times? 5 times or so, if my calculation is right, that of the size of Rwanda. It's about branding. And we are a natural hub because of our location. We are equidistant to almost anywhere in the world. That's one of the things about the center of the world concept. So we are a natural logistics hub. If that is done, probably. Aside that, there's a lot of increase in intra country aviation travel, especially because of the internationalization of Kumasi and Tamale airports. But it appears to me that the increase in intra country or domestic air services has come as a result of what is called traffic reassignment. Because of the bad roads, especially within Accra and Kumasi, many people who can afford decide to go up in the air, which then has a negative effect on our tourism. So again, for human-centeredness is something we need to. Pipelines, of course, the famous pipeline is the Atuabu gas pipeline. We do have the West Africa gas pipeline also, and Gensel's arrangement is a piping gas to power plants. There is not much to say about this because pipelines are devoted to goods generally, except that if we decide to create celery, which are forms of moving goods in similar type, we may be able to move large goods like bauxite and manganese through similar means. But we are on human-centeredness, and therefore I will skip that. So having scanned all these things, Mr. Chairman, what are some of the things to consider? And I know a lot more will come during the discussion, so I will try and be brief on that. The first thing I want to recommend for our consideration is for us to understand that the borders are vanishing and the need for us to look at the internationalization of transportation. I happen to be the moderator of what is called the Dakar second round of finance of infrastructure in Africa. And at our February meet, I was surprised that Ghana was not around, even though the Abidjan-Lagos corridor was being discussed and $16 billion were being discussed. I've taken a lot of interest in that project. And if you trace the route, you will realize that the route is designed to go past the major towns. I'm not so sure the extent to which we are positioning our people to take advantage of a huge corridor of that nature and the business impact of it, the fact that cities may relocate on nodal points of the corridor, connecting Abidjan all through Accra, Lomé, Cotonou, and Lagos. But there is a fast internationalization of that. And also, Mr. Chairman, having looked at a lot of things I've said on various modes, there's one major thing missing. And I don't know how the chief director will take this, but it is lack of coordinated thinking. And that lack of coordinated thinking is not only at the ministry or the transport sector level. Most of our state agencies tend not to talk to each other or creatives. That is the reason why I still insist that we ought to go back to what was done in 1998. What happened in 1998? Similar observations were made, similar studies were made. I happen to have been the legal specialist on one of those projects. At the end of all these studies with assistance of the World Bank, all the transport agencies were brought together under what was called the Ministry of Roads and Transport, MRT. The idea of MRT was to have one place where the infrastructure, the operators, everybody was at one place and coordinated with deputy ministers responsible for sectors. Why we broke it up, I still don't understand. I believe that it is important to go back to that system. Because Ghana is not like India. Ghana is not like India, where railway alone actually is such massive that you need a ministry for it. Even at the peak of railway, you only had 963 kilometers of rail line. At the peak, that's all that we had. So for us to create a ministry dedicated to those sectors beats my imagination. And I'm not talking about MPP or the particular minister, but avoidance of doubt, I do work for all these ministries. I'm saying that interagency coordination and one-stop shop will help solve a lot of these problems. And if for me, no recommendation is taken forward, I think we should consider bringing these ministries together, especially if we want to reduce the size of government also. Next recommendation, I think we need to pay a lot more attention. Let's see the next slide. To the soft aspects of our operation. There are many aspects of our operation which are soft, which we tend to overlook. I've talked about cycling, with the green transition, with the need to save the climate, etc. And these days, it's not too difficult to raise money if it comes to things which are related to green. And therefore, I recommend that we do have a soft, quote and unquote, division of GHA. I know GHA is here. They do have a planning division. I happen to have recently written the policy for the proposed new highway authority, for want of a better word. And some of these recommendations I know are being taken on board, but the more we push it, the more people understand the need for us not to just design roads. And this may surprise you. I have been involved in quite a lot of projects. And I can tell you that one of the biggest projects that I'm advising on now in the road sector, if you look at what is called the output specifications, where we have prescribed what the contractor should design, there is actually no human component. The design, and again, GHA is here, they can challenge it. You see, their design standards are always level A to F. A is when you are doing 80 kilometers per hour or more, or you come all the way to F where the road has failed. But nobody is calculating how many human beings you move per that traffic hour. Because moving 80 kilometers an hour could be cars. And 3 cars, each at 2.5 meters, occupy the same space one bus will occupy. And that bus takes 50 to 80 people. So it's a question of space. It's a question of economy. That is why you can then have parking lanes. You can have parks. You park and ride, etc., 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 etc. I mean, it creates its own sort of economy. So we need to be thinking about the soft side of GH. I intend to take this up and talk to the acting CEO about it, but people like Mabel and the international president are more powerful in this regard, and we should all add our weight. You just pay more attention also to emerging issues, some of which I had an occasion to draw. I recently spoke to DVLA's feature. The emergence of driverless cars, EV vehicles, etc. Particularly EV vehicles and digitization and electronics, our mechanics are not trained for it. We need to train more. It's a human issue. Otherwise, in addition to driverless cars, where we are going to have less drivers being employed, remember that. If we have less mechanics being employed, we will have an unemployment problem, and that's a human problem caused as a result of changes in attention to it. When car numbers become digitized, what are we going to do? I know DVLA, for example, is trying to create a new licensing system. I posed the question. I had to leave the session. I don't know whether the answer was given as to whether those new licenses, if digitized, will be on our phone. And the question is, if yes, what if the policeman stops me and my phone battery that runs out? Is he going to use my license, or I get away with that? I'm sure there's an answer to it, but that's just on the lighter side. These are some of the things which I imagine that we need to pay attention to. And then we need, of course, to also look at the changes in demography. I have talked about the fact that we are becoming a very, very urban environment. Apartments used not to be in vogue. Everybody wanted to live in his own house. These days, people live in apartments, etc. It makes it easier for us to plan our transportation if we understand what is going on around us. And we should stop planning it in the old fashioned way. Mr. Chairman, we also need to actually look at mass transit. We can't talk about this without looking at mass transit. It is difficult taking into account the nature of our roads. However, important, and we ought to be quite innovative. let's move. We are move again. We ought to be quite innovative about it. We attempted GAPT, Ayalolo, and all that. It is a question of revisiting it instead of wasting some of the resources, like the terminal in Adenta, which the last time I checked was not functioning properly. I've seen Mebu smile. I don't know what the problem is. I'm sure they will be able to answer it when question time comes. The nature of our cities are changing, and it is important to recognize and see how we move the people around. And then also now motorized transport. Yes, go on. For those who want to walk or cycle, we should make it safe for them. This is the modern era. Mr. Chairman, I also recommend that we take planning more seriously. And yeah, go again. Yeah, again. I need to get the phone up. Again and again. This is how we ensure that every single locality has got all the various parts, etc. And it is not difficult to achieve. If you know Sunyani, unless it's changed, I've not been to Sunyani for a while. Sunyani and a few of the Brona Havu towns, even where there are mud houses, there's a dual carriage road between them. Yeah, properly planned. That's how, unless somebody has destroyed it, it was quite properly planned. And we need to have more of those in our city so that as we develop. And I think, I'm not the expert on this, but I think we should be considering perhaps where we can, the introduction of trams, because I think the nature of some of our best way to look at them is to look at trams. The essence, importance of trams is that it helps us integrate both the road and mass transit on electric vehicles, like looking like trains, in the same space without needing to create a new. These are some of my thoughts, but this will not be possible, Mr. Chairman, if I don't emphasize that we need to have one oversight ministry bringing all these transport modes together. So I will re-emphasize my MRT recommendation. On this note, I thank you for inviting me to share a few thoughts.
Thank you very much, Mr. David Ofosudote. Please, we can do better. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mr. Ofosudote, I was also privileged to actually have moderated the session that you spoke, the presentation you referred to at the DVLA's conference. We didn't get the answer yet, but I know that DVLA would sort that aspect as we go along. We would not take too much of our time. We'll just go straight into the panel discussion where Mr. David Ofosudote will also be a panelist. But for now, we would invite no other than one of our past presidents and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport in the person of Reverend G.D. Mensah to take us on. Thank you. And just by way of announcement, we have the restrooms at the back, and then there's water available as well. If you just need, just give me a wave and we'll bring you some more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My big men are here. Chief TT, you are very much welcome. Mama May and Mabel. I just want to say a few things before we do our discussion on the topic. I want to find out from anybody that is here that what economic activity would you do without the use of transport? You have to use transport. But I think that maybe most of us who are involved in transport, people don't even recognize us. Yes. But I can tell you, when civil servants are going on retirement, they buy vehicles and put them into Uber or something. And I think that we need to look at that. Every segment of Ghanaian society, individuals, families, communities, and businesses benefits from transportation. It is a lifeline for millions of Ghanaians, connecting them to people, places, and possibilities. The consequences of unsafe and inadequate transport can be severe and dire. And so, therefore, any opportunity to contribute in addressing challenges of our public transport system is very important and a welcome news. Ladies and gentlemen, I must emphasize that our dialogue and discussions this afternoon must be more solution-oriented. And I bet you, I've enjoyed Lawyer Ofosu Doctor's delivery. In fact, he speaks and gives us a solution. I'm sure all of us have enjoyed this program, this topic that have just been discussed. All our online guests and participants, you are all most welcome, and kindly contribute fully. Send all your contributions and questions to the Zoom chat room with your name, organization, and where you are connecting from. Gentlemen and ladies, before I take my seat, permit me to do a quote that was done by United Nations and ESCAP. ESCAP is an institution meaning the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific. They said that the physical structure of a city, its size, sprawl, its way of life, and character are all dependent upon the nature and quality of the urban transport system. This is a food for thought. Look at Accra and Kumasi. These are two large cities. Do they fit into this quotation? Food for thought. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much. I think because we have to beat time, I will introduce my panelists. Lawyer Ofosu Doctor has already been introduced. So let me start from our lady, because the women always say ladies first. And I will do that. We have 4 panelists, but Lawyer Ofosu has already been introduced. I'll start with Mrs. Obri Yeboah. Engineer Mrs. Obri Yeboah, a fellow of Ghana Institute of Engineers, Ghana, is currently working with Soman Consult, a consulting firm responsible for the design and supervision of civil and road projects. She's a civil engineer and a professional transport planner with over 30 years experience in the road transport industry. The respect with which she is held by her professional colleagues is evident by her being a fellow of the Ghana Institute of Engineering and role model for women in logistics and transport. She has served in varied roles. Ladies and gentlemen, because of time, I'm cutting down the profile so that we can use the time properly. I introduce to you Mrs. May Obri Yeboah, who is one of our panelists. And the next person that I want to introduce is Dr. Kofi Mbia. Dr. Kofi Mbia is a household name, especially when you talk about maritime transport. And he was my mate in at Gimpa. And he was anyway, don't let me go there. English word. He was good. And we are still very close indeed. He's a private legal practitioner and a maritime law consultant. He holds a master's degree in marine management from Dalhousie University in Canada, a master's of laws from the IMO, International Maritime Law Institute, Malta, where he graduated with distinction and was a recipient of IMO Secretary General's Award for Best Overall Performance. Mr. Mbia, or Dr. Mbia, is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. I welcome him to take his seat. Our next member of the panel is Reverend Christopher Do Tokonu. Reverend Tokonu Do is a member of Chartered Institute of Transport and Logistics, UK. And he belongs to the Ghana branch also. Member of Transport Planning Society, UK. Member Institute of Transportation Engineers, USA. A member Institute of Road Transport Engineers, UK. And a member of Transport Planning Society, UK. I introduce to you Mr. Tokonu. You may take your seat. Yeah. So, good. That's right. Yeah, we are welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We have put down certain questions that we will want you to look at. In fact, we had lawyer Ofosu Dote's work a bit late, so we couldn't incorporate it in this. So we want him to, we have some 2 questions for him to answer them for us. We will want him to look at these questions before we start. This was just sent to me from the high table. Yes, your presentation was so insightful. I want to thank you for this. One key point you touched was we are lacking coordinated thinking among our transport agencies. What in your view, do you think we do to achieve this?
Okay, I think I will keep this answer very simple. I think I actually answered the question. And I did say that it is not only the transport sector agencies. The lack of coordinated thinking is a general disease of the country. The agencies don't seem to coordinate, but the answer to it I gave in respect of the transport sector is that we should return to the concept of the Ministry of Roads and Transport, which is one ministry under which all the agency so that they don't have to be leaving one ministry to the other to coordinate. But the ministry's own plan coordinates the whole sector from the beginning. So I think that answer is quite straightforward.
You didn't mince words when you said a lot of us, but it's you mentioned conscious creation of indiscipline. Conscious creation of discipline. This is a huge and big. In your view, what do we do to break this cycle?
I mean, there are some things where the answer is quite simple, actually. We just have to be disciplined. That's the answer. There's really no, I think the biggest problem, so for those of us who speak a lot in public, at times we are seen as critics, but it's because we want the system to run well. The biggest problem actually is from those who are responsible for ensuring discipline. When they are in discipline, it becomes difficult for them to discipline others. But at the same time, I belong to that school of philosophy which says that because somebody is not doing it doesn't mean you should add to it. Which is why I think all of us should keep talking and drawing attention. The more we draw attention, the more we are likely to get them to be disciplined. It's a major societal issue. So we each in our own way should try to be disciplined and call on those in charge to enforcing discipline to be fair self-discipline, so that they can discipline others. You cannot discipline others if you are not self-disciplined.
Yeah, you are right. You are right. Thank you. But we now want to touch on our questions. Question number one. Question number one, I want all our panelists to speak about it. And so maybe I'll start from you. You are closer to me. You, yes. For us to kickstart our in-depth discussions, let me begin with this. Is there more to public transportation than just moving people from point A to point B or to their destinations? Yes, but you should say something.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. And I actually, if you recall from the beginning, I talked about the fact that economists tend to focus on the three basic needs of humans.
Yeah.
But there is a fourth need we don't emphasize, which is the natural human desire to interact.
Okay.
And that's what makes us want to. And also because we need goods from others and we trade. It's not just a question of moving one. The only time transportation is consumed for itself is when you are going on a leisure ride.
That's right.
Other than that, transport doesn't have intrinsic value. It is derived demand, as we say in economics. Yeah, it is sought for something else, and there is more to it. Yeah.
Good. Reverend, would you want to say something?
Yes, there is more to it because without transport, economic growth will not be achieved. I always say it and I'll say it again. It is very important to look at transport when you want your economy to develop or grow. Everything relies on the movement of goods and services, and transport plays a very vital role. One of the key issues you raised was that although transport is a key issue of economic growth, it is always undervalued. You mentioned that. I am of the view that it's all because in the past, we did not have enough transport professionals.
Yeah.
I think that has been a very major challenge. It's of late that a lot of people are going into transport. There are a lot of research areas in transport we have not touched. There are a lot of key issues in transport we have not even been able to unearth. So yes, it has a major role, not just moving people all the way around, but there are other major roles transport can play. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam May.
Yeah, thank you. I believe that it is not just the movement of people from just one point to the other. Definitely with transportation, you have to ensure that whoever you are even moving is safe. And the transportation is also reliable, it's efficient, and affordable.
That's right.
So you just don't think about just the vehicle moving, but making sure that whether it's goods or the persons that you are moving, they are safe. And if the transportation system is also efficient and affordable for those who are being moved. Thank you.
Thank you. Doc.
Well, thank you. Let me just add a footnote. I think David pointed out that he is looking at it in terms of development, and he mentioned food, shelter, clothing, and said it's also important for us to remember food, shelter, clothing, and transport. So, take food, transport is there. If you take shelter, transport is there. If you take clothing, transport is there. All of us here, we had to move from our beds this morning. Transportation. So, in fact, it is not just about from point A to point B and getting to your destination. It is the fact that it is a driver for everything we do. Sometimes we talk about energy and what energy does in facilitating things, but energy itself is driven by transport. So it is important. I think it's Lord Lugard who way back said that the material development of West Africa can be summed up in one word: transport. And it is true at the time he said it, and now. And it is true now. I think May mentioned the point that, yes, you move from point A to point B, but I mean, if you could be in a hot air balloon to move from point A to point B, would that be what you desire? You know, so the issues of safety, security, comfort, all of these things are important, not only the movement from point A to point B. You know, I'm sure somewhere along the line we'll be talking about rickety trucks and all of that. So maybe at that point to become clear that it is not just the question of the movement, but all that encompasses the movement is important.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Madam May, I come to you once again with a question. For the sake of safety interests, all road users, not solely drivers, but also passengers and pedestrians, have a reasonable duty of care to be responsible to be safe. Can't we have national initiative or strategy to advance this cause?
Yes, we can. And as far as I know, there is.
This question is in your domain.
Because as a nation, we have the National Road Safety Strategy.
That's right.
And I know we are in the fourth strategy. It started in the early 2000s. And we have one right now, which is National Road Safety Strategy 4, which is spanning from the year 2021 to 2030. And in it, all stakeholders and road users have a part to play. So it is not just about the driver, but also all other road users, which includes pedestrians and also the passengers. One of the things that I think is hampering this safety management issue is funding, because the agencies are ready to do what they can so that people are safe. A lot of times we look at funding, and now we have to maybe prioritize, and then probably even what you have prioritized for, no funding comes and you cannot do it. So there is this issue of education of these road users, for them to know what they have to do as road users on the road. That is the pedestrians, and then the passengers also. I know of road safety campaigns that are being done. Unfortunately, these campaigns are done for just a short period, and then we stop.
Christmas.
not just Christmas alone, but well, you would have wished it spans over the whole year. Because as human beings, normally, if something is repetitive, that is when it sticks in your head. But if you do it once or twice and you leave it for another year, definitely the people will go back to the old habits. And we are aware of what is happening on our roads with pedestrians moving at areas they are not supposed to. In fact, there are even laws to that. Unfortunately, people are not educated to know what the laws are concerning even jaywalking. And so a lot of education will have to go, and these pedestrians and other road users, that is including the passengers, have a part to play. That is the empowerment of passengers to ensure that if you are in a vehicle, perhaps the driver is misbehaving, driving excessively, you have a part to play to ensure that you speak against it or report the person. And I know various areas have been identified where pedestrians can report to the police, and I think road safety and other agencies have numbers that you can call and report them. So I think a lot has to do with the education of these road users, that the rights that they have, so that they can do some of these things, and also if funding can be made available for the agencies also to work towards it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Reverend, I come to you with this question. Every country that you have traveled to, where there is that people-centeredness of their public transport system, is their ability to provide access to older and disabled people, like Lawyer Fosu said. Haven't we gotten to a point in our national life where public transport is made easier to older or disabled people with things like free travel or disabled boarding discount?
Mr. Moderator, I think we have gotten far beyond that. Just like the main speaker said, unfortunately, the indiscipline in the system has caused a lot. For example, I know that there are regulations and rules for the disabled. They are passed disability law, and it's in effect, it's very effective. I teach in one of the institutions. I will not mention the name, but I remember the years it has taken for the disability law to be applied, for them to put up a ramp for the disabled. It took time.
Yeah.
And it all boils down to discipline. But I believe strongly that if we are disciplined, and we enforce the policies that we are supposed to enforce, the agent should be taken care of properly. I am also aware that there are rules on even school children boarding public transport, and it's supposed to have been free of charge, but unfortunately it's no more there. I don't know whether it's because most of the public transport system is private, and because of the trotro and whatever we have, the trotro driver will not want to pick a child free. But if it's a government bus, the policy says that you should allow the children to board the bus free of charge. So yes, we are overdue. We should discipline ourselves and do the right thing. The structure is there. The institutional policies are there. And I'm so happy about this. The main speaker, he said, look, all the policies are favorable, but unfortunately for us, we are not disciplined enough to implement them.
I will agree with you that maybe because all the vehicles that are plying on our roads, especially in the urban and cities, belong to private people. And I doubt if a trotro guy will give a free pass to somebody who cannot see or somebody who is vulnerable. So I think because there is inadequate public transport system, if there are public transport system, it's easy to enforce it. Once the person has a pass, he can go on the trip free of charge.
To add up to what you said, thank you. I remember very well when I was a child, I was born in the university community. I know what we call Omnibus Services Authority.
Yeah.
OSA. Very effective, very efficient, time bound. You stand at UST Junction, and every 30 minutes there's a bus passing. And when you sit in the bus, privilege is given to the aged and the disabled.
Yeah.
And everything. So what went wrong? Indiscipline.
Right.
What went wrong? How did we lost it? Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Madam May.
Those of us who are a bit old, like he said,
Yeah.
saw what was happening
Okay. Yeah.
in the 60s and 70s where vehicles were there, the buses. And even look at our culture, you go into a bus and there's an elderly person. At those times, you would, even though you've paid for, you will stand up for the elderly person to sit down. And now there's nothing like that. We don't even have places demarcated for them. Yeah. Somebody who is physically challenged comes and he's standing or he's just there. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And like we said, all the laws and the whatever regulations are there. But now what is left for us to do is to enforce the laws. Yes, I think so. If as a nation, we would allow the law enforcement agencies to do their work, I think some of these will be done. And the regulators also. Because a lot of times, you get people trying to enforce the law, especially the regulators, and people go to other levels and the person is told to stop. There are 8 times that the police want to do their work, but unfortunately, it gets to a time they are bound, they can't do it. So as a nation, we should be prepared to let the law enforcement agencies or regulators do their work. And if they are to do their work, then some of these elderly and physically challenged rules and regulations that have been made for us, they can enforce it. And then even, we shouldn't talk about the private sector alone. I think that if there are laws for the public transport, it should go, some of them should go down to the private sector. A typical example is to do with the physically challenged. It doesn't matter whether it's a private sector person who is taking the person from one end to the other, or it's a public transport the person is using. I think that we should ensure that these laws are enforced so that people are comfortable and we do not pick out, if I'm physically challenged, then it means that I'm disadvantaged because I'll get to a place and nobody can help me. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. I think you take this question too. Let me give you another question. To make public transport services more attractive and thereby reduce car use, Ghana saw the birth of Greater Accra Passenger Transport Executives. That's what Lawyer Fosu has spoken about. Popularly called Ayalolo, a bus rapid transit system on 25th of November 2016. The initial operation was from Accra to Amasama and Accra to Ofanko. Some portions of lanes were widened. Redesign of some road network was done, enhancing the frequency and operating hours of these buses was established. The buses had modern features of technology. And as we dialogue today, then this noble project failed. Are there anything that Ayalolo didn't do right to be a viable alternative to personal driving? I know the question is long.
It's long. And,
yes, but I think
I'll try.
The lawyer Fosu has spoken about GAPTE or whatever.
And he himself at one point said he really doesn't know, but well, I'll try to.
There's someone, by someone here who is from.
Yes, maybe he would fill in the gaps. Probably what I may say also may not be the issue.
Yeah.
But I think looking back, I think we should have looked at this BRT thing very well as a nation. we maybe tried to do something, but for me, because we didn't have a true fare from one point to the other, and that's the bus had to at one point also be in traffic, the normal stream.
Yeah.
It got to a time you saw that people were now abusing the routes for the bus.
Meant for the
bus.
Dedicated route.
Dedicated. And so you see the bus coming and then the trotters are in it. Now they cannot move.
Yeah.
And more hours, we're spending more hours than it was supposed to be. So people now got fed up. It's like me taking a trotter. Sometimes trotters even are faster. That's what you say. That's what I think could have been one of the things. Then two, you could see that Ayalolo, yes, it was good, but rather with the education really went down with us, could be another issue. People, you know, it is electronic, very nice. People had to be taught that this is a different system that we are using, and this is how the way it operates, and whether it really got down to us as a people. I think that some education should have gone more than just what happened. And so some people were attracted, others didn't know the positives of it. And so people started declining its use because now they go and they don't even know how to operate it. Fair deal, I think I may be wrong. I never picked one anyway. Yeah. I've heard that the fare at some point was also higher than the normal one, trotters, etc. So people thought that I'll go for my usual trotro, forgetting also that probably you move faster and safer. Yeah. But the usual Ghanaian who would also be thinking of his pocket would go for. That is why people are even patronizing Okada and those other things. Yeah. Not forgetting about safety, but would go for some of these unsafe ways of movement. So I think this, and I don't know about, you know, they were also giving free rides to school children, and then I think the elderly. Okay. Whether government was subsidizing it to the extent that they could even break even, so that they can pay for their fuel and the maid pay salaries and all that. So this could have been some of the issues that have brought to the downfall of the Ayalolo. Thank you.
I want to add some few bits to it. I remember when Ayalolo was launched, I did not see any feature in its success. I'm sorry to say that. I'm not trying to be a pessimist. We have what we call priority lane. If you have Ayalolo buses queuing with all other vehicles and trotro, and people, passengers boarding it and getting to their destinations very late, it's not going to attract anybody. Unfortunately, I'm hearing that there were dedicated lanes, but I never saw what is dedicated lane in this country. I never. I have lived out there. I have seen what a dedicated lane is. A priority lane is for buses. And when we say time, it is time. If it is 5 minutes, 5 minutes. That is what will make Ayalolo successful. People will be attracted. People will know that they are not getting to their destinations late. If I bought Ayalolo on 2 occasions and I get to my destination late and my boss gives me on sanction, how would I go back and sit in Ayalolo? The other issue is that it was over politicized. Politicians leave this business to the technocrats to do. Leave it to the technocrats. Don't be politicizing projects. So this one comes and says, yes, it's not my project, so kill it. The other one comes and says, yes, it's my project, let it go on. We cannot continue like this in discipline. Not just in discipline among implementing agencies, even in discipline among politicians. I'm sorry to say this. Thank you.
Thank you. Doc, I give you one question. Cities, and I mean modern cities, do have a choice, and Accra is not an exception. But our city seems not to have a choice. We currently have unimaginable traffic dominating the roads. We have a city where walking and cycling are unsafe and unpleasant. We have a city where public transport, which is largely owned by the private sector, is indecently and infrequent. a city where hundreds, if not thousands, tricycles compete and race with cars, even though they are not Formula One? Can our capital city have a transport choice?
Thank you very much. I'm sure certainly if we want, we can have a transport choice. As David has mentioned, I mean, it's about discipline.
Sure.
You know, I don't think you can just wish anything to happen without having a plan. You need to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, if you don't prioritize, I mean, for a developing economy, there is no way you can meet all of your needs, all of your challenges, no. But you need to prioritize. Are we prioritizing? Do we see transport as a driver for our economy? We need to start from that premise. I mean, if you are importing in a year 100,000 vehicles into the country, 100,000 vehicles into the country in a year, about over 90% of these vehicles are used vehicles. If we are not checking, for example, the standards, now we have allowed a situation where we've gone back to even beyond the 10 years and you pay a penalty. You know, earlier on, we said you could not bring beyond 10 years. Now we allow you pay a penalty, etc. So with all of this, you can tell that the choices are there, but if we don't have a firm policy in place, I mean, the policy, in fact, I've also had a look at it, and I don't have, if you like, question marks with it, except maybe I think it was a little low on the maritime sector. David talked about spatial planning. Yeah. You know, I like to emphasize, for example, on marine spatial planning, especially because we are a coastal state. You know, to what extent have we left spaces, you know, as far as the beachfront is concerned? Yeah. What is the nature of the development? And therefore, what transportation systems do you put in place? I mean, pass on the Mochri Road, going to Kolebu or coming to Accra, and look at the Kole Lagoon. Yeah. And David talked about various transport systems, and all of them, if you go to Singapore, all of them are working. If you go to any of the developed economies, they are working. They are working, you know, so it means that the choices are there. Look, God blessed us with the sea. God blessed us with estuaries all over. From Tema to Takrade to Axim. Sure. We could have water transport. Yes. You know, we could have water transport. People could do tourism and stop at, say, Winneba. From there, they may go on and stop at Cape Coast or Elmina. They stop there and go to the next point. Government needs to create, and again, David mentioned it, the terminals. These are important. So in terms of choices, the choices are there. We can't continue to rely only on road transport to the extent of 95%. We can't. Railway must be the dominant transport system. One, because it is also a, and I don't know, maybe because I'm not an expert, but I hear a fight between the politicians on take and pay. We have excess capacity of electricity. And I'm asking myself, could this be real? When we need power for rail, in order that we can transform the economy in less than 10 years, we can do that. So when you talk about choices, I'm saying the choices are there. David outlined all of them, from road to air to waterway to drones to zip line to whatever you want. They're all there. But it's transport, as far as our policy is concerned, the overall policy. Where do we place transport? And therefore, the various limbs of transport. We need to have something that is modally complementary. So, look, I was in Vienna. Yeah. You stand on one point, and you can see the integrated nature of the transport systems. So, you join a bus or you join a coach, it takes you to a point, and you can do a transfer and go straight onto the rail. Sure. You take the rail, you can get to a point and transfer onto a water way or river system. You take it, you get to a point, and the transfer systems are modally complementary, seamless. And unless you have a plan that you work towards to achieve this, I do not see how. The choices are there. The choices, I would say, they are there, but we need to have a plan. We need to be intentional about it. We need to keep the conversation. We need to keep it going, time without number. So, David, that's the short I can say.
Yeah, David.
Yes. No, I'm not. I mean, I talk a lot about this business about we have access power, etc. It's one of just yesterday I was with one top government official and I said it should pass on that message. We should stop talking about that. You don't have access power. I don't know why people say that kind of thing. Look, the whole of Africa has 154,000 megawatts of power. That's exactly the power in Barcelona and Madrid. We don't have access power. Otherwise, we won't have. What we have is a problem where the ECG distribution capacity is unable to carry if we go above 6,000 megawatts. That is different from having excess power because the power you need to run transport, to run vehicle, etc., we are nowhere near there. But let me move away from there. For that, we are on transport. I believe, I don't know if Mr. Jamara can talk, but there is something important. I talked about spatial planning, and Kofi has also added this about maritime spatial planning. There is a part which made, and I'll talk about Ayalolo in particular. There's a part which made an Ayalolo fail, which we don't talk about. But at the time we designed GAPTI, there were 13 district assemblies, and you can't have a situation like in Accra where the assemblies don't coordinate. And there are several projects that we don't think are linked. I did a separate project for also another entity where we created what is called the Greater Metropolis Control, so that the police, for example, if it's the police, will coordinate among themselves and enforce discipline in traffic. Because if you create us, and remember you have the assemblies have got their task force. If you have 13 assemblies and each of them is, let's take the Liberation Road. On the left side is a different assembly. On the right side is a different assembly. Yeah, that's a fact. And they don't coordinate very much. So if you don't bring all of them together, so we created that concept. They were 13. What we forget, when politicians are doing things, they forget that everything they do has an effect. Today, there are 27 assemblies in the quote-unquote Ayalolo or Gapti district who are not coordinated. It's so, no matter how much you try, once a politician wants to be district chief executive of this small assembly, you divide Accra alone. How many assemblies do we have here? And we don't learn lessons. London tried to do this. They realized it didn't work. Then they did redistricting and consolidated. That's how we came by Greater Islington and all the peace coming from London. That is why you can take an underground train with your same card or what do you call that? Oyster. And join a bus and join overground and move around. And it doesn't matter whether it's private sector. We forget that the black cab in UK is owned by private people. It's not owned by with digitization. What is if you are a disciplined entity, you can have what we call public service obligation. I can have a private one and quote and unquote Ayalolo. I've discussed with Samson. All the plans are there. Where you run your bus and assume you pick a disabled person free of charge, the system records it, and you can come back for your money. We are just indisciplined. That's all that we are. I mean, let me leave it at that.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that, Accra. And I'm of the view that just like we have the national transport policy, which transcends beyond any government, it's there. And so any government that comes will have to go by the policy. I think some years ago, we had even Accra, there was this thing that was meant for Accra. What was it called? Master plan. Yes, master plan for Accra. And this master plan, I don't know how we are using it. Otherwise, I think that if we have a master plan for Accra, it does not matter who comes into office. We have to go by this master plan. And if we were going by, I think this integrated modal system Doc was talking about, it's all.
On that, I have to come back. That's not what is happening in practice.
Yes.
In practice, every government reviews every policy.
And that is what I'm saying.
I'm a beneficiary. I always get paid. I can tell you things I have done 4 times the same thing. Just read the policy we are talking about. Read the policy. It reviewed the 2008 policy in 2017. And it will be reviewed. Everybody reviews it. So, you see, when we are reviewing it, the consultation, by the time we finish, 4 years is about to end. And then we do another review and we are unable to implement. It's a major problem.
Okay, so that is I thought that if we could get this running across governments, it is something that will help. So that if we have planned this modal system, it won't happen in a year or in 4 years. It may take maybe 20 years to be able to achieve what we want. And so it does not matter which government comes, you continue, just like we have been talking about dual carriages. If one government comes and they continue, by 20 years, we'll have gotten a dual carriage from Accra to maybe Ouagadougou or wherever. Yeah, so that's my view.
Yeah, so let me ask a question. Does it mean that the people who manage all these policies that you are talking about are not ready to go by the policies? Because if these are all there and nobody is doing anything about it, people are starting new things on their own, and it's not benefiting us as Ghanaians.
It's not so. I think we just have to agree on how the system works.
Okay.
And the system has changed substantially since 1993.
All right.
I mean, we like freedom and party politics, but it has its major disadvantages. Because every 4 years, somebody has to show a manifesto.
Yeah.
And every time they want, the manifesto goes up. The National Development Planning Authority is there, but it is not a ministry. It doesn't sit in cabinet. You look at the constitution. Yeah. It's not a ministry. So, and if you look at Ministry of Finance, it is also, that's a ministry. So development planning, until the first step of President Akufo-Addo, they created a development planning ministry, which was not recreated in the 2020. So you have the plans there. Each assembly does a district development plan. It has all this. You can't have a district development plan without a master plan. There's a master plan in every locality. The thing is, I now look at my manifesto and look at how the manifestos go. I will build more roads. So it's infrastructure, because roads can be seen, and each person wants a road to his district. Then a person wants to be a district chief executive. So I cut the district into 2, and then Ayalolo is killed. Let me give you a clear example. Adenta and Ashama, where you have. Yeah. I don't know how many of you will remember. It used to be one assembly. Then, when President Kufuor wanted to recreate it, he created Adenta Ashama Assembly. Then the 2 MPs, one MPP, one NDC, both petitioned him, and he behaved like King Solomon. He cut it into 2. Adenta had only 6 assemblymen. Really? And under the law, you need 5 members to sit on a committee. That means each member sits on all the committees. Do you understand?
Yeah.
It is that push to have district chief executive position that makes us start cutting into district. I'll give you data. And when Rawlings was in PNDC, we had only about 80 district assemblies. By the time he was leaving power as a civil president, I think we had about 112, 110. By the time Kufuor was leaving power, we had about 168. By the time Moses was having power, we had about 210. Now we have 270 or so. It's almost equivalent to, you can't develop a nation by just keep cutting it up. The politics is just destroying everything.
David is not a politician, so it's easy for him to say that.
You say what? He's not a politician.
It's easy for me to.
Can I chip in this?
If you are
Yes.
If you are a politician and you need to share positions, then you realize that you have to divide the transport ministry.
I just want to add that we should take it or leave it. As part of the human-centered approach, to try as much as possible to move more people more than vehicles. That is why our roads are expanding and we still have traffic. move more people more than vehicles. If you have a 50-seater bus, and out of the 50-seater bus, we are able to accommodate 50 people. We have height of 5 vehicles.
Some, yes. Private vehicles. Yeah, and it's
I'm
gives you
coming to that. I'm
more.
coming to that. So on the road, yes, we will not stop putting up roads, but let us move more people on the roads.
But that's the problem
And then when we are able to do that, then we have what we call the carrot and the stick approach. We have given you the carrot, eat it. If you don't like it, we'll lash you small. We impose fines on you. We impose parking charges on you if you don't want to take the buses. The second thing I want to mention is that Accra is overdue. We need an underground. It might sound like a fairy tale, but I want to tell you the truth. We are overdue. We need an underground. An underground from Tema to the ministry, from ministry to the Kotoka Airport, and then from Kotoka Airport back to Tema as a golden triangle. And all vehicles that wants to go to the city center can park either at Kotoka, or when you are coming from Tema, you park in Tema and they use the underground. We need to decongest the city of vehicles. There's a lot to say, and then the last but not the least, when I say this, people are not happy. Government doesn't do business. Government does not do business.
Create the environment.
Create the environment. Make policies that will enhance private sector participation. Let the private sector do it. I a lot of fail because government want to do business. I'm hitting it on the head. If government does business, it becomes a charity. And when it becomes a charity, it's free for all. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. I think, okay. Right.
Please, we would, as much as possible, want to have a lot more solutions than what we have. As much as possible, we want to do that. So, and please make your submission very crisp, straight to the point. And I always have a bias. I always go sometimes to ladies first. So I'll take yours, and then after that, I'll come to the handsome gentleman here. So we'll take a round of 5 questions, and then we'll come back.
Thank you very much. My name is Stella Ado. I'm so pleased to have been here today because I've been educated a lot. The question that sometimes beats my mind is that we're talking about road, rail, but what about the air, the trams? I mean, is there any system in Ghana that is also thinking about moving up? I was just once discussing the cable movement, because like from Accra to Ebri, you know, most of these rocks are now falling. And what about a tram that you can sit in and then go, and then all the festivals and other things that we are having, the Kwewu, we can go by tram, you know, to Kwewu and come back. Is there anything like that in place? I just want to know. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Charles, and my question goes to lawyer Ovosudote. So, lawyer, you talked about lack of coordinated thinking. Lawyer, you talk about lack of coordinated thinking. Under the National Transport Policy, page 88, it recognized that the concept of planning, regulating, and enforcing public transport activities is done at the MMDA level, which is under Ministry of Local Government. Your solution was that railway and other things should be met under Ministry of Transport. Yes, but the policy rather shifts the operationalization of the policy to Ministry of Local Government. So if you look at the Local Government Act 936, it talks about how the assemblies coordinate the planning, regulating, and enforcing of public transport activities. But under the GUTP, there were reforms that were made. There was an advisory council created called the Urban Transport Advisory Council, which were made up of the ministers of transport, local government, and roads. And I think there are 1 or 2 other ministers who were to coordinate their thinking in making sure that the reforms that were initiated by the GUTP could be achieved. And that could have solved all the things we are talking about. But these ministries don't coordinate their thinking. So I just wanted you to elaborate on, yes, you could consolidate railway and transport, yes. But what about the law? The law actually mandates local government to do a lot of these activities. How does local government, transport, and roads think together to create the solution that we need? Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, I'm Gertrude. I'm from the Ministry of Roads and Highways. Mine is more of a clarification. So under the Ministry of Roads and Highways, no, under all the transport sector ministries, we have what we call the Transport Sector Working Group. That's an umbrella that brings the various means of transport together. So initially there used to be all the ministries of transport together, but then it was separated. And then I think the reason that was given was that they wanted to name the various ministries so that they could allocate funds to the subjects. So if it's Ministry of Roads, then funds are allocated to the Ministry of Roads. So that was why that was done. That's the reason we have. So there is a forum for all the transport sector ministries to work together and discuss some of the issues that are cross-cutting. So recently we had a conference where we discussed issues on intermodal transport, like what was mentioned. So there is a forum that collectively discusses some of these, and then it also helps to prevent doubling of efforts. Like sometimes some of the works overlaps. So we discuss some of these things. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. My question, I'm Robert from Ministry of Roads and Highways. You know, my question goes to Doc. Sorry, lawyer. Yes, please. As part of your presentation, you mentioned that there's a lot of indiscipline, of which I agree with you. You spoke about NMT, that's non-motorized transport. You know, as part of our effort, when we're constructing the Okwasi interchange, we built some pedestrian walkways and some bicycle lanes. But, you know, this morning when I was coming to work, the pedestrian walkways that we have in Accra is being occupied by, what do you call it, hawkers. Now, in your presentation, I didn't see any recommendation for law enforcement. Last 2 years, I was in Abuja with Madam Mabel for a urban sustainability conference. And when you go to Abuja, as part of their road safety effort, they have, let's say, enforcement agency within road safety, and they are in uniforms that help to, you know, prevent some of these issues. So I want to know your solution towards this indiscipline that we have, I mean, on our roads. Thank you very much.
It will be interesting to know how the transport something working group something works after this. So probably after this, don't worry, I will come see you. We'll take two more.
Thank you very much. My name is Ohene Eboa. I would like to place on record that I'm privileged today to have two men sitting at the high table who actually shaped my life at the beginning of as when I joined the transport business. The persons of Mr. Fusudote and GD. Thank you very much, sir. I have two things to speak about. About the indiscipline that Mr. Fusu mentioned. We have a system where this the commercial transport, the toll system we have now, per the law, the PNDC law 317 that you mentioned, has given virtually all transport space access to the GPRTU. So other operators don't have access to the terminal. This has forced people to come on the road and do this wah-wah thing. You also spoke about the issue of scale loading. Those few ones who are in the terminals have to do the scale loading because if they go onto the streets and decide to do the picking from the bus stops, the police are there to stop them from doing that. They say you can drop persons, but you can't pick any person there. I've had the opportunity of confronting quite a number of them to tell me why I can drop a passenger, but I cannot pick a passenger there. So it all comes back to the kind of system we have left to rot. Lawyer, I want to make this passionate appeal that maybe having noticed this problem going forward, if we can have a way of addressing the issue where we can liberate, we can give everybody, all the operators, access to the public terminals. Mind you, the terminals we have and the GPI2 have virtually occupying our public space. And it is very difficult and very pathetic that they're taking this public space as their own and not allow other people also to play in that same space. That is creating that kind of indiscipline we have on our roads. So if you try going to maybe some at this time of the day from say Accra, you may have to pay from Accra to Circle. The same vehicle will collect from Circle to maybe Achimota. The same vehicle will collect from Achimota to maybe Pokwasi before it sends you to in some, because of the kind of uncontrolled system we have. So please, if there's something that you can do about it, we will look forward to see it.
We have a question online. John Arthur, please ask your question, and then we'll take the last from Shaibu. John Arthur.
Yes, my question is that in every city you have population densities and the transport priorities. I believe that if Ghana is also able to do that, it will help us. What would the panelists or the lead panelists recommend for government when it comes to supply of transport and transportation densities? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm Kwame Kodia. I'm with the National Road Safety Authority. I think it's been a very exciting afternoon. I have a question or two for my senior Ofosu Dorte. I like the point you make about successive governments having to invest in infrastructure because it is good for the optics and the politics without a corresponding investment in services within the road transport sector. It will be interesting to have your recommendation on how we can begin to push the establishment to expand investment in these areas, given that consistent funding in the other side appear not to yield a set of outcomes that we expect as far as the service delivery indicators are concerned. Then on the examples, we have seen discussion around what appear or the reasons that have led to the failures regarding the number of studies, research outcomes, study trips, and the likes. Would we say that somehow, to a certain extent, it is because we have relied so heavily on best practice in the past without having to focus on local-based solutions? Because where we tend to import solutions that may work in other jurisdictions without particularly paying attention to the social context, sometimes it does appear that creates the missing link for some of the issues that we may have. I would like to hear your view on that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think Auntie May will take the issue of the road safety police, and then the rest, Mr. David Ofosudete, and any other panelists who would want to chip in after that can do so. So, Mr. Ofosudete and Madam May. Yes, you may go ahead, please.
Okay, so yes, for Nigeria, the road safety personnel have some enforcement laws where they act like how we see the police over here in Ghana. National Road Safety Authority in this country do not have that kind of enforcement powers, but has been enhanced from what it was as a commission to an authority. And so they do have something similar, but not like the Nigerians. They were waiting for the regulation to be passed, which has been done. I think it was passed just recently. And so now they can operationalize the act. And I'm sure very soon, I don't know, but probably you see them in uniform. It will be very soon. They may go to that extent of you identifying them by some uniform of some kind, because there are some that would go to the transport terminals to ensure that these transport operators go by what the law says. So it will be not the same as the Nigerians, but at least the law has been enhanced. And we know that learning from what other countries have done, at least if they are, like I kept saying, if you remember, we should allow the regulators to do their work. If we allow them to do their work, then you'll see a change. Because in Nigeria, how dare you go and bribe or talk to a road safety officer in a certain way? You dare not. And people are rather afraid of the road safety officers than the police. So I'm sure if, as a country, we help National Road Safety Authority to use the powers that have been given to them now and they operationalize, I'm sure it will be a better place for us. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm happy to hear from May that the enforcement is finally coming. I mean, just in passing, before I come to my point, road safety has moved from committee to council to authority. And personally, there's a comment I normally make. I see a lot of organizations in Ghana changing their name to authority, and the more you give them authority, the less powerful they become. I'm hoping this time, I mean, the authority becomes real authority, and people don't override, I mean, the things that they make. What did you say your name is? The lady from Gertrude. Obviously, from your look, you are a very young lady. In life, we are a collection of our experiences. I've been associated with your ministry and DHA for so long that I was smiling when you were talking about transport sector working groups. It's nothing new. It's been there, and I'm quite familiar with how it works, but it doesn't work. It's. I mean, I think those of us who are experienced enough know that there's a difference between creating a committee and a policy. And then we are here, we can't criticize the policy, but it is not what we are seeing on the ground. Do you understand? So the coordinating team is there, but frankly, it doesn't really work. One of the things, and it relates to the other comment, one of the things we tend to forget that the transport sector does not exist in isolation. I keep harping on town planning. And there is something I'm going to say that may surprise many. It's one of the agencies that was totally neglected for so long until like 925 came into force. It's the only department which has seen almost every ministry. As at my last count, it has seen 14 different ministries. At some point, it was part of Ministry of Youth and Sports. Yes, you can check. I have perhaps worked with every single director of town planning since 1999. I wrote the town planning law. I know what I'm talking about. Now, we have been campaigning for 20 years to move it to local government. It only happened 2 years ago. And from before that, it was at Ministry of Environment and Planning. So you can have all the transport sector committee coordinating meetings. It doesn't work because the entity that plans for development to be in space, which determines your movement, it was at a different place. Local government is its right home. Now you talked about the local government entity and all the rest. I think you are confusing two completely separate things. There's a difference between a national policy, which regulates transport, and a policy under LI 961, where the district assemblies, you refer to the local government service, look at LI 961 and look at LI 1630. That deals with the things regarding spatial planning and the right of the district assemblies to regulate transport, their role is very, very limited. At best, it is about the AMRU or the ROS unit. But even then, they don't have funding. So at times, assemblies are there, GHA and the rest, they are doing a project from head office. The assembly only finds out, goes through. Previously, the assemblies could award road contracts. Now it's almost zero. So the assembly's role is not, is when it comes to terminal control, which has been taken from them and controlled by GPRTU. So what is on paper is not the same as what is in practice. Yes, let's face that fact. Gupta, all that, again, something has been very quiet. I understand why he is quiet. Some of us, we thank God the day we left the public service. We were the people who were part of all this. I met all the chief executives. We put all this Gupta, Gapti, Ayalolo, we put it together. I created and registered it. The man is here, you can ask him. A month ago, they were all in my office discussing how to solve the problem. I'm talking about practical things. If somebody divides the country into districts, and the district chief executive was not part of the 13 who formed GAPTI, end of story. It doesn't matter your transport policy in Mebu's document in page 88. It doesn't really matter. That's the point I'm trying to make. What's the last comment I want to make? On the request of the buses, the one from Korea. Yes, you can actually achieve that through PPPs. And I actually mentioned it, that there was a time the World Bank was even setting up, trying to give money for setting up a transport finance company. You can actually use private sector, but it will only work if you dedicate a bus lane. But if you don't, look, just look at this. Whenever there is a government change, people occupy public toilets and all the rest. It doesn't end there. Some people build on roadways because their government is in power. When you block the roadway, or the person is the one who has blocked the express lane or the bus lane for that period because the constituency chairman, you've killed Ayalolo. Just go to Adenta and see how that bus stop is not working. You don't have to go far. When you break, talk to the people. They will tell you in private the things they can't say in public. So let's, all of us who have ears, me, some of us, we speak all the time. We speak to politicians. I want the government to succeed. Talk to your friends. Politics is killing the operations. Simple. Oh, which was the question? Sorry. Oh, yeah. The cable car, actually, you're going to put me in trouble. There are all kinds of solutions. There is actually two people from somewhere in East Asia who proposed cable car and made proposals and discussions, etc. But at times, when somebody wants to implement things, it gets to a point, then people look at where is this man coming from? Or at times, even when the thing is gone back, then the question be who? So in this big government project, was it yesterday or 2 days ago, I spoke somewhere and I said, one reason projects don't succeed is not because of opposition. It's because of government itself. And I'm not talking about MPP. There are times people fight over who should lead implementation. The same government. I can guarantee you, I am more afraid of a change of minister than I am afraid of a change of government. When a minister changes, they stop more projects than when a government changes. So the problem is not lack of solution. There are several solutions. There are trams. So we can put the trams on the road. We don't even need to go up. We can put it on the road. It's a question of who controls it. And if I think in the same government, if Cletus is not my man, I have to move him and give it to TT. Then halfway TT, I move TT and give it to GD. That's why it doesn't happen.
So thank you very much. We'll take some thoughts from our chief director, and then we'll take 2 additional comments. And we'll be done, unfortunately, for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. David, thank you. I mean, we've worked together, so you know so much. I just want to draw attention to a few things that the ministry is doing because it's worth informing. With respect to the cable cars, yes, we've had some feasibility study done, and we are looking at it in phases. So there's this company which is thinking of having the cable cars from Kaswa down to the CBD. But some of the places where they mount their, what do you call it, the cables and then the pillars, they need to acquire some licenses or they need to acquire the land. So they are working on that. They've had consultations with is it tourism and others, national security and others. So we are hopeful that they will be able to get over it. Then I don't want to talk too much on their dental terminal. Yes, it's not fully operational. As soon as this terminal was done, then the COVID struck. And so the manager who was supposed to ensure that we are able to get business at the business area, unfortunately came back and said it's been very difficult looking at what he proposed. People don't want to pay for that space. So we are currently looking for other government agencies or government agencies which will occupy the place to attract people to get the place used. We have spoken to DVLA to see whether they can come and have a DVLA office there. We know that DVLA office always pulls people together, but we are always open to suggestions. Then on the disabled, for the MMT buses, we have come up with new specifications, and we are hoping that should we get funding, the buses that will be brought in would consider the disabled. So that we have also done. We are yet to talk to STC about it, but MMT, because they service the aged, the disabled, that is the first place we are considering. For the 0 degree tourist attraction, I'll pick it up and see how far we can go on that. Thank you. And then the Volta Lake. We're talking about the tree stumps. Yes, GMA is responsible. Every year, they allocate some budgetary funds for the removal. They've done a substantial amount, but we have also spoken to the Danish embassy, and they also conducted a feasibility study, and they're looking at e-navigation. And with that, they would educate the canoe operators on how to navigate using the e-system. And they are on it. We started about a year ago. They are still on it. Just a few weeks ago, we spoke because I wanted to know how far it's gone, and it appears they are interested in it. So that is what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, let me just. Okay, yes, I just have a question, Mr. Lawyer. I was shocked about 2 weeks ago when I learned in Singapore. Okay, all the lawyers. In Singapore, for you to own a vehicle, you need a line. You need to pay almost somewhere $15,000, $20,000 to buy a car and drive. License to drive a car. Can it be implemented in Ghana?
So thank you very much. As the question is being answered, we will then take the final thoughts or final comments from the panelists for the evening. Oh, you want to ask? Yes,
Yeah. Yes. What do you have? You know, in Singapore, apart from that, importation, to import the vehicle into the country, the duty you have to pay is prohibitive deliberately because they have a small country. They don't want many cars. The public transport systems are efficient, and therefore you don't need a car. We cannot do the same here. No. So over here, I don't think it will be possible.
Yeah, I wanted to make a contribution. Throughout the presentation, we have heard a lot about indiscipline that is killing most of our initiatives and programs when they are launched, even though they are human-centered. And I want to identify interagency rivalry, where agencies, ministries are supposed to collaborate on something. For whatever reason, they are unable to cooperate. It could be personal or whatever it is. And my solution to it would be, we must enforce accountability. Because if you are supposed to do things together for success of a project or program, and you fail to do that without any cause, you should be held accountable for your actions. If these are not done, we will continue to experience this. And so much money will run down the drain, like the BRT system. Very good program, but we have not seen, it has not seen the light of the day. Thank you very much. I am Colonel Dr. Mohammed Wumbe. I'm also a traditional chief.
Yes, sir. So thank you very much. We'll now take final thoughts from the panelists. We'll take the final thoughts from the panelists. So, Engineer May.
Yeah, so I wanted to comment on the last Kwame's issue about best practices, whether we should take wholesale best practices and come and implement them in our nation. I think that it's good to see what others have done and then rather come back to your country and see which part of those best practices can be used so that you do not bring wholesale and then now it becomes a white elephant. You cannot use whatever you brought. So whatever we have in our nation, please let it be human-centered. Probably elsewhere you go and then it's just the vehicles, the roads, the vehicles. Please let us look at the human being and let the things that we are importing be human-friendly so that we have safety as our ultimate. We ensure that those we are transporting, even the goods that we are transporting, we can take them from one place to the other safely and reliably. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Tokono. Would you take your turn, after which we have Dr. Mbia and then
on a very strong note, I want us to revisit the subject of Ayalolo. I think it can work. We can make it work, devoid of all the challenges that we have. And I would entreat all those who are Ayalolo planners to look at time as a very important tool in implementing Ayalolo bus program. Because if I know, I will be very comfortable if I can sit in Ayalolo and get to my destination on time. I'll be very comfortable in using Ayalolo. And this can be done if we give them the priority way. What I'm seeing on the Achimota road is not a priority lane. I stand to be corrected if I'm wrong. I've been challenged somewhere that there was a priority lane, but I never saw any priority lane. So Ayalolo queues with other vehicles, Ayalolo queues with other saloon cars, and the convoy is so long, the overcapacity and a whole lot of issues.
Yeah.
So please let us revisit the subject as Ayalolo. I've seen them breaking houses to expand the road. I wish that we can dedicate one lane purely for the rapid transport system.
Okay, sir.
And let's see how it works.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mbia, can we have your final thoughts?
Thank you very much. Just a quick one on the question of the utilization of the various transport modes. We can't continue to rely on road 95%. Whatever it takes for us to develop the railway line as a basis of our transportation policy, I think we need to do it. And we must not also, as a solution, start off, we want to do the railway line from Tema to Paga, from Accra to Paga. The railway line could be done in incremental phases. We could do Accra and Sawam. Later, we can continue to Kukuridua, we can continue to Nkoko, and we can do the railway line by ourselves. So it's important to bear in mind. I say the railway line also because this is the time where we must show green mobility in the things that we do. The green transition must reflect in the transport things that we take on board, so that right from the chief director, I'm not too sure, you talked about transport you were bringing in. I don't know whether we have taken account of the new technologies, the fuel that they will be using, and therefore all of these things in terms of the environment, so that the developed economies don't dump on us what they are discarding, because we are moving to cleaner fuels. Yeah, we are moving to solar energy, all of these renewables. So these things should reflect in our way going forward. If we didn't do it in the past, going forward, we should be looking at these so that we are environmentally compliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mbia. We'll take Dr. Fosudote's remarks.
Okay, so my closing remarks will be just answering 3 quick questions, and then we just make one recommendation. One has to do with the comment that May also commented on best practices. Somebody asked. This is personal to me. As a rule, I hardly use the word best practice. So far as I'm concerned, there is hardly anything like best practice. It's part of the neo-colonial mentality we suffer from. I believe in universal standards. There are some things which are universal standards. So, for example, how air conditions work is universal. How people sit with the ergonomics of the chair, these are standard practices. Then there is something we should call appropriate practices, not best practice. The fact that it is working in Europe doesn't mean it work here. So I agree with her. Yes, and I'm not taking anything away from her. 100% I agree with her. You study it and adapt what is best for you. What we seem to think is everything in Europe or America is best, and it must work here. That is why some people think that just because you got a degree from Harvard makes you sensible. No, I don't. If I have seen very, very smart people who schooled in Ghana and very dumb people who school abroad, and vice versa. Is what you are saying. The practice appropriate, simple. So that's my first comment. On the question of railway, I agree 100% with Kofi, especially with long distance, because we can take a lot of burden off the road. We forget. It's a very simple way to calculate how much it is costing us. When you increase the axle load of a vehicle by 1, its impact on road deterioration is 4 times. It's as simple as that. You don't. So if you take a simple articulator going to Burkina Faso and you load it, instead of 30 tons, you load it by 40 tons, the axle distribution, you actually deteriorating the road. It's as simple as that. No country has developed fast without rail network. So I don't know if we destroyed our rail network. If we want to really develop fast, we need to come back to that. GD was asking me here about dedicated lanes and whether it will really work, the Ayalolo thing, and I talked about the discipline, all that. And part of the challenges people always face is, if the space is there, why can't we use it? For appropriate practices in our environment, you don't do a full-time dedicated lane. It's based on time. Between a certain period and a certain period, it is dedicated to quote and unquote Ayalolo. You can even do what is called reverse flow. At a certain point in the time, it goes in the opposite direction. There are specific things we can do which is appropriate. So we don't need to necessarily do a dual carriage. We can have a middle lane which goes one way in the south in the morning, because data from what we call OD surveys, origin and destination survey, will show you that at a certain period in time, everybody is going this way. And in the evening, we are running back to the periphery. There are ways to do this. And again, let me repeat, I have been paid on number of studies I cannot count. We built a whole traffic and database for DUR. We got a lot of money. It's not seen in reality. So the data is there. It's a question of implementation. My last one is a recommendation for CILT, especially the Fellows Guild. You see, when you do something like this and it becomes just a symposium and we end there, it must have a life of its own. And a life of its own doesn't mean necessarily doing the same symposium all the time. I believe CILT should develop a criteria of what is human-centered. What do we call human-centered? And that criteria, it can be very simple. Does it focus on moving a certain number of people as against vehicles? how many number of people does it move per track hour? Does it have walkways, etc., etc.? Does it connect where the cities are located, etc.? Whatever criteria, and we can work on this. This is not, I won't charge you legal services for this. We can work on it as that becomes a criteria that we send to, and I mean, Mabel is our member, and then GHA and the rest, they are all here. When they do, at the moment, before they do any road, for example, they do public consultation. We should be attending and checking whether that human-centered criteria that we have talked about is actually in this. And the way to get public servants to do the right thing is make it public. Just say that, yes, make it public. I don't know why. There's nothing. Just send it to the press. This is the public-centered criteria we have sent to them. We have seen this road at the public consultation. We can't find this. We can't find this. If you do one, you will see the next time they are coming, they will bring it. And you will see that some politicians will put it in their manifesto. Then even though they are doing the politics, they will be human-centered. That's my recommendation for CILT. You know, the truth is that at times, politicians, and I have a lot of friends and politicians, at times they want certain things said. They can say it. So they pass it through institutes like this, and it is said. I mean, people will tell you the trick. So let's do some of these things. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Fosubote. Without wasting my time, I want to now call upon the prefect of the CILT Fellows Guild for his closing remarks. Please give me a round of applause.
I actually have a very difficult work to do. A very difficult work to do. Trying to give you a closing remarks and also to try to sum up a few of the things that have been said. If I want to say everything here, all the ideas and the rest, we will not close today. But I just mentioned a few of them. Forgive me not mentioning everything because of the time. But then I want to thank all of you and also David, the key speaker, as well as the panelists. And all that has been said by them all. A few of them that I want to mention is that you talk about lack of coordinated thinking, where recommendation has been made that for us to get back or look at bringing back MRT or bringing the transport agencies together, the round table where they can look at things together instead of everybody doing their own thing at various places and the rest. I think it's very, very important. And that is linked also with the railway network, which has been talked about, and even the air. When somebody lands from a plane, all that he looks for, how do I get home? What are the linkages? Where he can, is it by rail or by road and the rest? It takes people to sit down together to plan. Otherwise, the guy planning railways doesn't think about the airport. I've been in the port, and sometimes when the ship lands and discharging cargo, and as operations, what I want is that the cargo must be moved out so I have more space to receive more cargo and get a lot more ships operated or serviced so that they go, and then more coming, and that brings in more money to the economy. But sometimes those doing the roads have difficulty. They don't take the road, the port into consideration. So therefore, what do? They sit down and plan something else. And sometimes it takes the port management to do their own roads so that they can get the goods going out. But if we can sit together at a round table, all of us, how do we do this? We want to build this city, port networks, and then we all think about it. It makes it easier. Somebody could say that they could all be at their various places and they can plan together, or they can bring them together. But coming together one day, that's also cost. If you put them together, they sit, they think together. But coming from different agencies takes time and takes cost. So it's an important issue we should be looking at. coordinated thinking, and also coordinating, and that will help to integrate, therefore, our various transport modes and the rest. I know that Boankra, for example, has been on the page or paper for a very long time now, so many years now, so that that place will help to reach out the northern sector of the country and the other countries beyond, to move goods over there. But Boankra has been there for so many years now. Why is it not done? You see it? That's integration. When the goods come, they move from the port, they get to Boankra, and then those in Kumasi doesn't need to come to the port chasing this. They pick it there and then it's gone, or to Burkina Faso. But I can tell you, politics. That's me. That's how I understand it's politics. That's why I'll be sitting down there. It's a very good facility that will help move transport, modal transport. You see, the one who owns the articulated trucks in Ghana, who owns that articulated trucks, the politicians, and those who have the money bags. So if the railway is there to make things cost, the articulated trucks will not move. Simple. So the interests, political interests and personal interests, those are the things killing the economy. So let's look at these things and then go by it and do this integrated. This is very, very important. Now, they also talk about the soft and operational aspects, where the lanes, the bicycle lanes or motorcycle lanes can be separated from the vehicles. I would like to see a day where the motorcycle lines will be made such that you see the motorcycle, how they move and even cross. They can have their own lane and be separated from the road vehicles while they move, and the motorcycles are also moving on their lane, separated. That'd be beautiful. And also ease congestion on our roads. Mass transit has been mentioned. Need to move more people than what we do. Bringing in cars, creating roads, bringing in vehicles, cars, and all those kind of things. Yeah, when people are moved, mass, in buses and the rest, then we can even park our cars and the rest. Yeah. You park your car, you go on a bus, and then you're moving. And also, where are people moving? In the mornings, where are people moving from? Why don't we get the buses to those areas and move a lot of people to their works on time, workplaces on time? But you have this, only the trotro, they do their own thing. They do it by their rules. So we need to have these interventions to ensure that more people are moved out, more people are moved in and out to various places they want to move. Those is also gaps into planning. How do we move more people to where they want to go and then do business? That's also very important. Now, we also talk about safety, and there it links with indiscipline. I think indiscipline is the most used word in this evening. Indiscipline. And it's very true. Indiscipline on our roads. The motorcycle guy, when the red light shows, he goes away. I've been in Benin, Liberia, but when the red light shows and you traffic, everybody stops. And when it's moved up, then everybody moves. But in Ghana, it's not so. Why is it so? Is it the implementation or the enforcement? I think it is something simple that can be done. Why can't we enforce the rules in Ghana? But just around us, they're able to enforce them. I don't think their police units or law enforcement are more powerful, or even more than us. But let's look at that and then see how we can at least stop that. It is very, very important. Indiscipline is so much on the road. I can say that on the roads, this is indiscipline is from the top to the down. I've seen ministers important people in society being arrested on the streets because they are broken or pass the wrong places. Why is this so? MPs and the rest, because I'm a big man, so I'm above the law. And then the younger ones also follow it. If the minister is doing it, if the MPs are breaking the law, why don't I also break it? And that is indiscipline. And I think we must look at all this in society and then talk about it and ensure that all this happens so that movement of goods and people on the roads could be efficient. Here again, also, are we recruiting the right people, licensing the right drivers to move our vehicles on the road? The truck road drivers and all the who drive. Are we licensing the right people? Or licenses are given to just anybody who wants to drive on the road? It's an issue we have to look at. It's part of indiscipline. And we talk about every GPRTU. Do you have the right kinds of people there who understand transport or movement of people and goods and how they could be moved efficiently, reliably, and safely? So those are policies to look at. We want to reshape some of these policies to look at how in those areas we can improve things. It is also said that education, very, very important. Ghana has many good laws. There are many laws on the books, very good ones, but they are not implemented or people are not educated to understand them. And sometimes I ask myself, the lawmakers or those who are supposed to educate, the lawyers and the police, is it because they want people to be ignorant so they can be arresting them and making money? The laws are made, nobody cares to educate anybody about the laws. And they said ignorance is no what? Excuse. But somebody needs to educate the public. So it's an area to look at, whether it's the NCC or the safety institutions on safety matters and the rest, so that they have education. In fact, they mentioned that funding is a problem to do that. Funding to this safety institution is also a problem. I hope that this should be taken up seriously so that we can do the right things. Planning must be taken seriously. It's a point that has been made. There are master plans which are not being implemented. Every government comes and they do their own thing. This one comes with their manifesto and they forget about what plans that are there and they want to do the right thing. That's again an aspect of indiscipline. Now, town and country people have been mentioned. And sometimes I do wonder whether we actually have them in Ghana. I know we have them. I was in Burkina Faso and I could see an area that is not inhabited. It has already been designed, planned. The roads are made, electricity poles fixed, water lines, everything. So that later on they put the houses in them, planned. So that movement is made easy. In Ghana, it's not so. It's all, you put a house here, somebody put the next one here, your car cannot even pass through. Why is it so? Who approves those permits and the rest for people to go that way in this country? And some have been broken down anyway. But who had, in the first place, permitted those ones, given permits for those? So those are issues that we need to be addressing, good planning, and then also discipline. It's very, very important. And I also want to say that we should be looking at professionalism more than politics. That when we want to, even governments, when they come into power, when they want to appoint people to various disciplines, let's look for professionals who can handle those places. And also, therefore, plan very well. But when we have these professionals there, you put a political activist there rather than somebody who understands. We should have chaos. It's important we look at all some of these things. And
I want to thank all of you for
city business
your contributions.
Ghana
And,
affiliate
I
stations,
hope that
including
the advice given,
Kasha.
Fellows Guild has taken that seriously, and also we work on that and see how we can keep on with this education, so that things will change and we find a better transport system in our country. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You're on Orange 107.9 FM also in Kumasi.
There's another round of applause for the fellows prefects. When the prefect speaks, then the rest are made to go home.
In Northeast, we are 98.1.
That announcement, there's a cocktail at the first floor. So just enter this place, we all rush into the first floor to take our cocktail.
We are as 92.1.
A good picture just right after the closing prayer. So without wasting my time, I want to call Reverend Tokono to give us the closing.
Shall we kindly bow down heads? Lord, we are so grateful to you. We thank you for moments like this. We thank you for this opportunity to think about Ghana and transport in Ghana. Your word says that your people perish because of lack of knowledge. Father, with all this knowledge that we have acquired, grant us that will, grant us that discipline, grant us that opportunity to be able to implement them and achieve them. All the issues we have raised, they are not just physical. There are spiritual components to them. Our inability to be disciplined enough as a nation, it's in your hands. You are the one who touches the heart of men, including women. Lord, we pray that all these efforts will not be fruitless, but you will lead us, direct our path, grant us that heart desire to be able to accomplish this. Let us have disciplined society. Let us have a disciplined government. Let us have a disciplined institutional agencies responsible for transport. Let us have discipline among all the other private institutions so that we can have discipline on our roads. Father, give us that self-will to recognize this. We thank you, we bless you for this successful meeting. You started with you and you have ended it well with us. We are so grateful. In Jesus' name, amen.
Right, so my high table, please, Derek, please, you can have a seat. May all of you can move forward here. And my wonderful audience, please, can you join them at the back for us to take our group picture? Yes. Godwin. Don't move this one away.
Just organize the media and channel force and run down the reputation of the bank. Because the same people are going to be affected. So let's be careful. The minority should be very cautious. We don't have the money to engage the money. Ensure that we get to do what the truth is. So I'm happy to let you know that NIB, yes, NIB capitalization, but the treasury of NIB is not done. Treasury of NIB is not being run as.
So I want to capture your smiles in the picture. He's just
against the code of ethics.
Very well to capture everybody.
Let's go ahead to develop over system policies.
Your smile. CILT. Fellows. Can we say fellows? Baritone fellows.
That has become more relevant and become more innovative than the national.
Quick like that. I see. All right. So please, we all get into first floor for our cocktail. First floor, the networking begins now. Thank you so very much for coming. Thank you so very much for coming. We are getting to first floor, please. for our little bites.
You have to show more processes when it comes to matters of this nature, which can affect the well-being of our and also lead us to the line. So I invited you.
Thank you.
I also challenge you. Don't take what I'm telling you and think. Investigate. Engage the MDs. Engage the current board chair, the current boss, and you will get to know what the truth is. I have here all the loan portfolios that were done by the previous administration. I have already mentioned that.
We all get into first floor, please. Make sure that you take a bite, make a new friend before we leave.
ASN Financial Services, Brooks Assets Management Limited, First Bank Financial Services Limited, and so on and so forth. These are non-banking institutions.